I'd like to open the Littleton City Council study session for Tuesday, March 23, 2021. The time is 6:30 or 18:30. All members are attending. We have 2 members attending by Zoom. All right, Council, we have 2 items on our agenda tonight. We'll start with ID number 21-055. What we have there, it's going to be an update for the ULUC. And we're going to get, and Candid Keys will be here with us tonight, I do believe. All right, so we're not here to make changes, but it is to tell us where you are at this point. Correct? All right. With that, I'll turn it over to the city manager.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Actually, I'm just going to turn immediately right over to Kathleen and Brett Keast, who's here this evening. So, Kathleen?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and members of Council. Tonight is scheduled a briefing of the ULUC. This is the continuation of our process of discovery that we all began with the community back in February of last year, so a little over a year. Just like for those of you that went through the unifying vision and the comprehensive plan, we're at the point now where every step of the way we are guided by our unifying vision and comprehensive plan, but we continue to learn more and more from our community, bring that back to you, as well as have some discussion. In many ways, you serve as our compass, providing direction for us and helping us further develop the ULUC, which, you know, in a way, if you're the compass, then that ULUC maybe becomes our map by the time we're ready to bring that to you on June 7th. And that process, just to remind you, is, you know, the opportunity starting June 7th with the draft. We'll have until July 30th, so a little under 2 months. And you'll get the chance to explore that ULUC, check our work. We have briefings scheduled to discuss the actual draft on June 22nd. And then July 13th, and then we'll have a chance to review both what we've incorporated from your input as well as from the community's input on August 24th. So those are all dates that are coming up before we solidify the draft that then begins its consideration process, which starts with Historical Preservation Board and then moves to Planning Commission and ultimately comes to City Council for their consideration. I expect, just like with the comprehensive plan and the process that we went through that you'll offer refinements, calibrations, changes, and once the ULUC returns, then it'll begin that sort of solid document for consideration by all of our bodies. I would like to spend just a few minutes to start this evening to just go through the list of sort of what we've been calling ULUC parking lot items and just kind of give you an update on those. I think one of the things that we talked about in January, I'm working off of that list that we summarized at the end of that January meeting, was that the importance of further defining and developing that one-to-one relationship with our future land use and character map. I think that you'll see we may even have some recommendations of adjustments we might make on that future land use and character map, which is very common practice. I'm sure that Brett might also have some ideas on that. We've heard from members of council, and I think this might have been Councilmember Fay in particular, a more clear definition on walkability. We know that that's been a goal that's been defined in the comprehensive plan. We've heard from you the importance of buffers, particularly for certain uses like animal treatment, animal boarding, storage facilities. We've talked about the competing goals that we have at the city for both revenue and housing goals, for example. I know that that will continue to be an ongoing conversation and policy direction from you. We've heard the requests for better graphics, visuals, maps. We think we're bringing you some good tools this evening as part of the presentation and discussion with Brett. We've also talked about getting to true mixed use, creating a path, particularly when we're thinking about corridors. So that is, again, another ongoing that I think we'll talk some about tonight. We'll probably spend more time on that at our May briefing. May 11th will be the last briefing before we have that draft. Sustainability issues like charging stations, types of plants. I think, Mayor, you mentioned the importance of native plants. We've been able to rely on a great cross-collaboration team from our various departments to help really take into consideration the context in which we operate here in the city and in Colorado. We've heard mention from, for example, from Councilmember Elrod about the importance of public art. We've passed along the strategic plan from the Arts and Culture Commission to our consultant team to try and think through if there's opportunities to show that connection. We've talked about details on lot size, height, density. You know, we've really been on a listening tour through the studios to continue to gain information and really a greater understanding from our community as a whole and build on what we learned through the comprehensive plan and what we learned through ultimately the unifying vision. We talked about view corridors. We talked about Littleton Boulevard, both that it has a unique context. Is there a way to create a district-type approach to that? We know that that's going to overlap with the Historical Preservation Code. I think that the mayor mentioned the importance of that as a gateway to the city. We also know that we have a great collection of that mid-mile and the mid-modern century architecture as well. We've talked about that balance between commercial and housing. That is, you know, one that we hope to influence with that discussion and help bring you added tools with our economic model and the work that we're doing both on project-specific model, but then also a long-term fiscal health model. I know that the finances and financial sustainability are a key goal of council. It's your number 2 confirmed goal for the next 2 years. So I know that there's going to be a lot of overlap with those conversations and how the ULUC can work to your ultimate vision for financial sustainability in the city. We talked about compatibility, things like height, roof slopes. We also talked about Broadway and other corridors, really trying to combine the policy guidance that you've got from both the Transportation Master Plan, so knowing that that transportation intersection along those corridors, as well as the comprehensive plan. So that is one that's still ongoing as well. And then I think we did also talk about how our intention is to kind of create a path for our planned developments in the city. So you'll see some of that work as we bring the draft to you as well. So that, I feel like, is the list from the 12th of January. If there's anything that I've missed, if it occurs to you during the meeting, let's bring it up. Yes, please.
Got everything. There's 2 things. One was 2 things. One was the Conservation District, and I wasn't sure if that was part of Littleton Boulevard.
Yes.
Okay, so that's not separate. And then we talked about, Kendra Keys talked about adding what they called a neighborhood business district.
Yes, that's part of that district.
Is that Littleton?
Yes.
Okay,
And
Littleton
so
Boulevard. Okay, then-
I think that we'll be able to, Brett, I don't know if you'll spend a lot of time on that this evening, but we can definitely bring back a greater sense of where we're heading conceptually. I think we as staff had a tremendous amount of feedback for Brett, right? He might smile when I say that. So as we worked through that process, so I know he has a next iteration for us to look at as part of our a future deliverable. So we are working towards that end of kind of creating some unique tools that recognize Littleton Boulevard in particular, and maybe some other parts of the city as well.
Thank you for the
Yeah,
summary. Appreciate it.
absolutely. Okay, so at this point, he's become a familiar face to all of you, but Brett Keys, CEO of Candid Keys Collaborative, is with us this evening to guide us through. As many of you know, we had to postpone our March studio with the community. We did reschedule that.
Is anyone able to hear my voice?
Yes, we can hear you. And we did reschedule that for yesterday.
I'm not able to hear anybody if the meeting has started.
Oh. Tyler, can we get some help with that? But we'll bring some of that input that we received from the community last night as well. So I think that we'll have to kind of work through.
All right,
Hopefully,
Brett, how you
Brett.
doing there? Can you hear us? No? I wonder if he needs to log out, log in.
Okay. Let's see. I can't tell him that because he can't hear us.
I know. I'd love to call him somehow.
Carol, can you hear me?
Yes. Well, he wants Carol.
Carol, were you hearing the council chamber? I can't hear you. You're muted, Carol.
I was hearing everything fine, thank you.
Great.
Okay, then it's something on your side, Brett. Is your audio up all the way? Can you hear me, Brett?
That
I don't
is the
think that he
issue.
can hear.
Karina,
I
and you're
think,
there
yeah,
as
his
well,
audio
Karina.
is turned off.
Karina, can you hear us?
I know.
And now, I wonder if Karina's there now.
If anybody has a way of getting a hold of Brett, I think it's just his audio is turned down.
I can hear you. I was just changing location.
Good, thank you. So, all right, well. Kathleen, anything else you can?
Mayor, do you mind if, since we're trying to get a hold of Brett, can I take a quick detour and talk about our Historic Preservation Board?
That would be a great thing to start with right now.
Okay. Okay, so I emailed council just right before the meeting started, an email, and Colleen went ahead and contacted the 13 individuals who did not get appointed to any board. I did review here yesterday afternoon with the mayor and pro tem just about how we were going to approach this. And since we had at least one council member who wanted to, look at an additional person, we decided to look at all 13. So we sent an email yesterday to all of them to see if they were even interested in the Historic Preservation Board. As you can see from my email, there were 4 individuals. So what we're recommending here is that we go ahead and schedule the meeting here for this Thursday at 6 p.m. And we'll send out a virtual notice. We'll handle it just like we did your other interviews. We'll tape this thing, and then we'll post it after the next day. And we're going to go ahead and schedule a 15-minute interview with each of the 4. And so the meeting itself, we'll go ahead and schedule for an hour and a half to allow for deliberation. Perhaps it'll be shorter than that, but we'll go ahead and schedule it for that period. Was it 10 minutes? Excuse me. Okay, well then, I'd be happy to schedule 10 minutes. Okay, my mistake. So we'll go ahead and schedule those for 10 minutes, and then obviously you can deliberate, and then whatever your recommendation is, we'll carry that forward to the next regular meeting and make the formal appointment.
Great, well,
Do
thank
we
you
know
very
when
much.
we're doing that meeting, Mark?
Okay.
Good. Brett, are you able to hear us?
Mark, when are we doing
I
that?
can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great. If you can hang on just 1 minute, please.
Thursday night?
Okay.
What's the question?
When are we doing that meeting?
This Thursday at
Thursday,
6 p.m.
6 p.m.
Lucy had been trying to reach all of you. I think we had heard from all of you. I think there may have been one who was still trying to move things aside, but that is the date. That's in order for us to get the appointment approved at a regular meeting and for that individual then to sit on the next HPB meeting.
All right. Well, Brett, we're going to get back to our agenda. Thank you. And that is discussing the update on the codes. And Kathleen gave you a really good introduction, Brett, that you're a familiar face, but yet your face looks a little different for some reason. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's that goatee or something. I don't know what it is. But Brett, if you could take over.
All right. Well, good evening. Apologize for the mix-up. We tested beforehand. Everything worked fine. So logging out, logging back in worked for me. So can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, super. Well, great to be back with you. I appreciate the opportunity to have this time with you. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the next building block in the sequence. This is number 3 out of 4, focused on neighborhoods. As you probably know, we had a Envision Studio 5 about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and then we followed that up with Envision Studio number 6 last night. We're coming off of that meeting, so we'll be able to share some of the conversations that we had during the meeting. Advance the slide here.
Hey Kathleen, how many people attended last night?
Sorry, we had 108 registered and 63 logins. So I'm not sure if we had anyone participating as two people from the same login.
I had
But
trouble getting logged in, so I registered, but wasn't able to get in for some reason.
you just call
Okay.
me next time once you set up.
You're able to see my next slide?
Yes, Brett.
Okay. So just kind of taking a half step back and trying to put everything into perspective, particularly as it relates to residential development. As you may recall, in the comprehensive plan, there was a series of forecasts for the 2040 population ranging from 51 to 74,000. And the decision was made to select the midpoint of 62,745 persons. Looking between the census in 2000 and a census estimate in 2019, your population had grown by about almost 7,000 people, which is a 15.5%, which I was surprised by, actually, knowing that the community's largely been built out. So that was good news for me. The projected population increase is 15,000 people, or 6,550 dwelling units. And I know there's been a big question by a lot of people of how could we possibly absorb another 6,600 housing units in the community. So obviously that means that we need to be efficient with our land use. There is already redevelopment that is happening, and there is redevelopment on the forefront and inquiries. And really the community is sitting in a terrific location with good access via rail and a lot of wonderful assets. So we would expect that market will, continue to thrive. Lots more opportunities for true mixed use, integrated mixed use, according to a master development plan that we would envision there being vertically mixed use buildings. And of course, portion of those being required to be residential. That amount or percent hasn't yet been determined, but I think we're close to being able to do that. Of course, we want compact, walkable communities, particularly close to transit stops and transit routes, and continuing to strive toward that goal of the comp plan, and then being sustainable. You all have a much better understanding than do I in terms of fiscal sustainability for the community and what that means. And I know y'all been putting a lot of focus and a lot of effort into that. So we're doing everything we can from the code perspective to help you meet those goals. But beyond that, it's, everything from environmental and economic sustainability and things of that nature. And of course, the code doesn't solve all those problems, but the code certainly contributes to it and can have an impact on that taking place. Okay, if I can get my next slide to advance, I'm in good shape. There we go. So just taking a look at the business survey results, as you are probably aware, that's been done every 2 years. And this has been part of what we've been looking at as we think about, what is the community's heartbeat on some of these issues, and particularly your business owners. If we're going to continue to succeed in business, we have to do everything possible to allow them to succeed. And you can see the highlighted lines there that kind of paint a bleak picture. But I think the community and the leadership is on top of this, and we're certainly doing everything we can in terms of the land use code to turn some of these things around. In their response over the period from 2012 to 2018, their view of quality commercial development declined by 11%. The quality of residential declined by 14%. And only 55% now, as of 3 years ago, believe that there is a variety of housing options compared to what there was in 2012 when 71% felt that way. And this is important because of the need to provide housing for all folks within the community, and particularly for the local employers. We understand that the vast majority of employees cannot live in Littleton, and they are having to commute from outside, which, as you can imagine, creates problems for local business owners. And so this is one of the reasons why we're looking very closely at neighborhoods and what we can do to help drive some of these changes. When we look at, these are from the housing study that was done. And honestly, I was a little taken aback when I started doing some research on these. I wasn't surprised by the percentage of 2 to 4 unit homes. That is not uncommon to Littleton. That is a national phenomena. You've probably heard of people talking about the missing middle. This is what they're talking about, is that we have a lot of single family detached homes and we have apartments, but we have very few of those 2 to 4 unit structures, which we are referring to as multiplexes, or they could be, a small townhome or row house. So we are looking to define that much more clearly. The current ordinance doesn't specifically define those housing types, kind of lumps them all together into single family attached. So we're defining each individual housing type, spelling out what it is, and then spelling out in the use matrix where those units are permitted in what districts. And we're making some other adjustments to the structure of the zoning districts that I'll talk to you about here in just a moment. So there's really a disproportionate share of that missing middle. Very fair, there's only, 3% of the overall housing stock. And as I said, that's not necessarily uncommon to Littleton. It's very common across the country, but it is really pronounced in your community. In terms of affordability, the forecast that they look at, here in 5 years, there will be 0 homes that are deemed affordable to residents of Littleton. That's alarming. And by 2032, only 18% of the rental units will be affordable. Of course, like in every community across the country that I've been studying for the last 10, 15 years, housing prices are much outpacing incomes. So we're getting upside down, and it's making it more and more unaffordable in Littleton and in communities across the country, because incomes just aren't keeping pace with housing prices. And so we're getting a greater and greater percentage of cost-burdened residents, and at some point it pushes them out because they simply can't afford to live in Littleton. So they're going, farther out, farther away from employment in town. So that's something that we've got our eye on. We're very privy to and wanting to make sure that we're addressing, that point and how we can address that in terms of housing in the community. We've had a lot of discussion about accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. And this is just kind of looking at national statistics. When you look at all buyers across, 28% of them said that the reason for wanting an ADU is for aging parents. And obviously the baby boomers have been aging, and many of us have aging parents. And, we're ourselves looking at bringing our mother-in-law into the house here in Texas. And then other things are cost savings, just the ability. You've got, community college there. It could be for college students. People could claim some income on those. And if they're designed well, I'll show you some pictures here in a little bit, and we have good standards. They can really be hidden. So you could not tell that there is an accessory dwelling unit by driving down the street. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And we'll talk about what we heard last night from everybody that participated in the Vision Studio. And generally what I heard in my session, and certainly Kathleen can weigh in on what she's seen from some of the other sessions that, of course, I was not able to attend. When considering neighborhoods, what do people look at? Quality of the neighborhood. Number one, by far and away. And this was reinforced by the polling that we did in the last Envision Studio of asking people, what can we do to sustain the quality and integrity of your neighborhoods? Or what are those values? And everybody said, allow for renovation, allow for improvement. If it makes sense, allow for some expansion of the home so that older homes in town can remain competitive with some of the newer properties in the area, and also, just for resale value and things of that nature. Convenience to job is number two. And as we talked about, that has been increasingly a problem for many of the employees that work for the businesses in town. And then overall affordability of homes. So I think they pretty much stand to reason. You would kind of expect those three to rise to the top, but those are all contributing to, what we are looking at here as a backdrop. So what does it all mean? Demographics and demands have been shifting for a long time. The country, as we all know, has gone through a lot with the housing bust and boom in 2008. Many changes to mortgage rules. We've had a lot of national disasters. We've had elections and all sorts of things that have really created major sways in markets and demands and prices and things of that nature. And we've seen an increasing percentage in town of persons who are 55 plus, as we're seeing all across the country as the baby boomers age. And the problem is that as they age, the working age from 35 to 54 has been decreasing proportionately. So we're getting older as a community, meaning there's going to be more fixed incomes, meaning affordability is going to be important for people to stay in place and to continue to live within the community. And then the working age population is declining, and there's a relatively flat population increase through 2040 for your younger folks, 18 to 24. They go off to college. Will they come back from college, and will they be able to afford to live in Littleton? So housing affordability will be even more pronounced as these things continue to play out in the future, and that's without intervention. And we know there's lots of conversations there locally with your housing task force, and hopefully we are contributing positively to this conversation on the things that we can do with the Unified Land Use Code to address them. Local businesses are already stating that they're struggling, and I would imagine that trend would continue again unless we are able to intervene and start making some changes. So of the 6,500 new housing units that are forecast in the comp plan by 2040, we're behind in terms of units that are affordable. And so that means a majority of those will need to be affordable. So the question is, what is affordable? Department of Housing and Urban Development defines it as a percentage of the median household income. And so there was some of that shown. It's in the housing study, so you can do some more research, or staff can provide that. We're not talking about, trailer homes. We're not talking about everything having to be, efficiency unit apartments. That's not what is meant by affordable here. We can still have very nice, very attractive, highly livable neighborhoods, but we just have to think differently about the housing types, the housing sizes, and how we can accommodate populations different than what we have to this point. So the ULUC, I think, provides a lot of opportunity for addressing these things. The last session that we met you to discuss was the corridor mixed use building block. And since we've had a chance to work with you, we've been able to start to quantify some of these things with staff's help. Basically, the areas that are shown in navy on the map or blue on the map are properties that are currently zoned business industrial today and don't permit any residential land use. That adds up to 708 acres. So right now, those do not allow for residential use unless they were to be rezoned. We are proposing to rezone these properties to CM or corridor mixed, which provides for commercial and residential land uses. Of course, we need to have land for industrial development, things of that nature. So not all of this necessarily needs to be rezoned for those parcels that are suitable for that use type, or they're already developed as that, and they work well within that area. 708 acres. Staff provided us information that of all the properties that are higher density in the community, the average density of all those is 45 units per acre. That stands to reason because that's exactly the density that is in your current zoning ordinance. So the properties that have developed up to the maximum density that they've been able to get under the current zoning ordinance. So when you look at that 708 acres, to meet the population projection of 6,550 dwelling units and 15,000 people, we would only need an average of 9.25 units per acre across this 700 acres. So many of these properties are, already on the verge of redevelopment. We can craft the unified code to make sure that we require a certain percentage of land area within redevelopment to be residential, and we can set minimum densities. And so we can make sure that anything that redevelops from the adoption forward will include residential and will include, a lot of residential units that can move us toward that goal of 6,550 additional housing units. So I was very pleased, honestly, that when we did the calculations that it worked out that way. So just this alone, this change alone, without doing anything else that we're going to talk about tonight, could, over the course of time, provide for all the land area to meet all of the units that are forecasted, the 6,500 additional housing units. So I was very pleased when the numbers, worked out that way. So next, I wanted to talk a little bit about the poll results, what we heard from the folks who attended the last Envision Studio. Actually, it was number 5 because this was number 6 last night. So we asked them a whole number of questions, and these were their responses. What are the most important characteristics for livable neighborhoods? And quality attainable housing was, what everybody agreed, or what the vast majority agreed as being, the most important, followed by having walkable neighborhoods that have good access to retail, service, and transit. Obviously, we've heard all about that all along through this process, which came out of the comprehensive plan process. And then you can see, followed by access to parks and trails, a blend of housing types, and then continuity of the same housing types. So people recognize that we need to sustain the quality of our housing, and we need to provide for opportunities for people to invest and reinvest and bring on new housing types, not necessarily in the existing neighborhoods, but in a lot of other areas that will develop or redevelop. The characteristics that make your neighborhood livable, the highest percentage of those said renovation or expansion of existing homes. So what can we do from the code to allow that? We can get out of the way. We can make sure that we're not putting up any barriers or any additional burdens that would, make that more difficult than it needs to be. So we can spell out some standards that say, we can add a front porch. We can build in a front porch. We can add a family room onto the back. Potentially, we can add an accessory dwelling unit in the back or inside or above a garage, or we can convert a garage. And basically spelling out very clearly in the ordinance what's required to do so, and then allowing that to be permitted administratively, subject to the standards that we're going to review, council's going to review, and adopt as part of this unified land use code. Of course, there's always a process that if an application comes in and it is not conforming to the regulations, that staff will advance it through the commission and potentially even through the council as well, depending upon how you want to do that. The characteristics, again, that make your community livable. The next highest ranked was preserving existing single-family neighborhoods. So obviously the first two are, keep the neighborhoods or neighborhoods that are high quality, but we're going to talk about what they talked about in addition to that. So those were very telling for us, that people recognize that that's the heart and soul of the community. That's where all our population has chosen to live and chosen to, raise their families and be employed. And so we recognize that as being important. One of the most important design qualities of duplexes. So we basically put a lot of options out on the table. One of those was, are there areas of town that can convert from single family detached today into duplexes, which obviously would double the population for those that do. It would create another type of housing, obviously at a different price point. And so people said, we want to make sure that entrances and doors are on separate sides. We want to make sure that there's only a single driveway, no distinguishing exterior changes. So essentially having design standards that would allow this to happen. But if it is to happen, that the design standards would make sure that that neighborhood continues to look and feel exactly like a single family neighborhood. There wouldn't be 2 or 3 mailboxes hanging out front. There wouldn't be multiple addresses. There wouldn't be multiple driveways or multiple garages. So you can see on the pictures there to the side, one is, an obvious duplex, and that would change the character of your neighborhoods. The other is a duplex, but it looks exactly like a single family, and there's nothing there to suggest that that would be a duplex. So this is one area where there would be design standards that if we say, and we talked about that last night, we'll talk about that. If duplexes are permitted, where can they be permitted? And if these standards are in place, are you comfortable with that? And generally the answer was absolutely. So that was good news. We asked if residential design standards were important. There was kind of some waffling. I guess we didn't really provide enough information, but we kind of filled that gap last night. So for instance, accessory dwelling units, if those are permitted, we need to have design standards to say what they look like, how big they are, where they can be placed, where they can't be placed, everything so that they blend in seamlessly with a neighborhood. Same thing for duplexes. So I had a question here, but just make note of when do you think design standards are most appropriate? So you might just kind of lock that in and we can talk about that here in a moment. Continuing to move forward here. One of the most important residential design standards, complementary building design. So as you can see by the photograph, this actually exists. Unless it is the policy decision of the city that there are areas, blocks, half blocks that we intend for there to be, wholesale new development over time. then we could allow this to happen and start allowing that pattern to happen. But we don't want this pattern to happen all over the community, which would disrupt the character of our neighborhoods. So what we heard loud and clear from everybody is if there's going to be infill development, it needs to be designed of similar scale, similar width, similar height, have similar roof pitches, similar materials and windows, so that that home fits in as if it's been there the entire time. And nobody driving by would ever know that it's a new home, other than maybe some new landscaping. So that would be another area where design standards would be important. What strategies are best to achieve sustainable housing? They spoke up and said to require a percentage of affordable units in new development. So not looking to absorb affordable units wholesale in some of the existing neighborhoods, other than through accessory dwelling units, through possible duplex conversions. But as things develop, as we're talking about in the corridor mixed use areas, where it makes the most sense to have more density and more activity and so forth, that's where we would look to include a certain percentage of affordable housing. We agree with that sentiment. We did some research. Colorado Housing Affordability Project outlined these 4 things of allowing accessory dwelling units by right. We talked about that. There was broad support of the folks, both in the last 2 or even 3 Envision studios. So we can talk about that more tonight. Allow a minimum of 25 units per acre within an 1/8 of a mile of a transit station. That's what we are working to accomplish with the CM district, where there are development sites and redevelopment sites. So we would want to make sure that we, crank up the density as high as appropriate for the community without, obscuring views or creating too much impact on surrounding properties or properties that are within view, et cetera. But they would be designed to be walkable to the transit station. Allow a minimum of 10 units per acre and at least 10% of the land area. You've already exceeded that. So the land use code will not do anything to decrease that, but will actually allow that to increase. And then to reduce minimum parking requirements by 50% for deed restricted affordable housing units. So that is certainly what is very common that a lot of communities do, just to help them be that much more affordable by reducing that added costs, and particularly if they're in locations that are walkable to transit stations and downtown and other things, then they don't need the car like they would elsewhere. Which housing types meet the needs of young families, age-in-place retirees, and working residents? The first ranked that everybody said were attached row houses and townhomes. Those are usually, up to 6 units in a row. Sometimes you can go larger, but 6 units is pretty typical. Those would be, side by side by side by side. They could be individually platted on individual lots, so they can be fee simple owned, or if they were all platted on a single lot, they could be rented out. So we can spell that out, how that works in the code. But that would certainly provide another housing format that would fit the missing middle, and would be, at a lesser cost than a full single family detached. They also talked about small single family residences. I'll show you some examples of that right now. You've got some relatively small homes. This could go to the size of a tiny home, but when we're thinking small, we're thinking more of 800, 900, 1,000 square feet. There's some of those in town, but we could provide formats for some of that would fit in nicely within a neighborhood environment. Here are some examples of a small single family. The top middle photo is a cottage cluster, basically a small development with a series of small units that are clustered around open space, clustered around amenities and can be well buffered around the perimeter. So I'll show you an example here in a moment. Single to duplex conversions on the upper right. I would not be looking for that where you have a wide sidewalk and two front doors on the same elevation. What we've been discussing is to require a second door on a side or rear elevation so that there is literally no indication that this is a duplex as opposed to single family. Oh, this is attractive and pretty well done, but that's what the conversation has been. Multiplex, up to fourplex, 2, 3, 4 units in a multiplex. Then you have the town units where you can get 6 to 8 in a row. I would envision, in certain locations being limited to 2 stories if they're nestled in a neighborhood. In other locations, certainly they may go to, taller. I don't know what that looks like. 3-story, depending upon the floor plans and layout of those units. And then garden apartments. Again, in certain locations where they are near residents, where they may be of concern, we can do a garden apartment. Still have the density up there by having smaller unit types, but holding the height to 2 stories. You could potentially go to 3 stories, kind of in the middle of a complex. It would be farther away. But then as we are developing in some of the corridor mixed areas, we could allow, taller apartment complexes and mixed use buildings and things of that nature, depending upon location and context. This is an example that we have drafted just to help illustrate what a cottage cluster could look like. This is at Windermere and Lake. It is a vacant tract, as you probably all know now, largely. And so if that were to be redeveloped, you have apartments to the east of the property. Of course, you have streets to the west and to the south that are separating it from R2, which are single-family neighborhoods, and then to the north. So we could use, dense buffer yard along those property lines to help separate them. Have greater distance of the units from that shared property boundary, and kind of nestle them in so that they're self-contained, but providing, up to, I believe we said, 16 or 18 units per acre. You would have shared garages or shared parking areas. So this map shows kind of 4 shared garages, which could be up to 4 units per. So people could purchase a garage or they could park, outside, what have you. So that's an example. I don't recall the name of it, but there are a couple good examples in Denver of cottage clusters. I'll try to find those and forward them. So, maybe staff can go look at them or take photos or what have you. So that would be an example of a cottage cluster. I'm trying to keep things moving here. We talked about strategies needed to address housing affordability or attainability. Everybody said zone for mixed housing types, primarily thinking about the corridors. And so that was by far and away the highest ranked of those. We're also looking for places that maybe aren't the most suitable for single family, or where there may be pressure over time. What's shown on this map, no magic to them, not a lot of research, just simply looking at half blocks that are currently single family that face apartment complexes or face a business or face, railroad or other types of things, and major roadways like some of the single family lots along Broadway. And so are those likely to remain single family? Might there be pressure for multiplex or townhome or row house in these locations? There was general support for that when we discussed it last night. So if that were the case, these and other properties that we identified could be zoned to allow that to happen. We wouldn't forcibly go out and do anything, but basically property owners in that area could could be notified to know that, their homes could potentially be sold. People could assemble 2 or 3 lots and put up a multiplex or a couple townhomes or something like that. So that would be probably housing types that would be more suitable for those locations, and at the same time would be transferring from single family to multifamily. One other way to help get the unit count up, provide living options that are more affordable for local employees and other people as they age. They may want, age restricted and no maintenance properties. So these could provide that, so they don't have to worry about mowing or shoveling or anything else that comes along with that. Making progress here. The accessory dwelling units, we've talked about several different types. Those that are above a garage, whether that garage is existing or constructed to match the home, that was the number 1 ranked option. The number 2 ranked option is what we called kind of an invisible tiny home that would be in a rear yard. It would be limited as to its square footage or the percentage of the rear yard. It would be designed so that it would be entirely hidden from the street. That if, a single story, mostly 2-story in some locations where you have larger lots and larger homes. Again, another way to provide housing for an aging parent or for, rental for a college student. Some of the conversation that was brought up last night was concern for short-term rentals. We talked about that, but we can talk about that more tonight. Certainly, the city has full control over that with the ordinance that you've already written. Converting the whole garage or having an interior unit that's entirely within the confines of a house. Again, no outward signs of there being into any rental property at all. So just illustrating that, this is what it could look like. We chose a part of town here that had an alley to show that, there may be a house, there's an existing wing on it. That wing could be converted into an accessory dwelling unit. You can have a unit above an existing garage. Potentially, you could build out a garage to provide for an accessory unit without changing the footprint, the size, the height. Or you can have a separate unit. In this case, with an alley, they could take access off of the alley. If they didn't have the alley there, they would take access off of the driveway. They would be required to have 1 additional parking space for that ADU. So that would be part of what the requirements are and what they would demonstrate with the ability to park vehicles on site. A handful of slides here left. Oops. Just looking at some of those real world examples of, over the garage, converting a garage. We call that kind of a visible tiny home that could be seen from the street. Converting a garage, enclosing it and making it a unit on the top right, the invisible tiny home on the lower left, and then a home interior where, some homes could accommodate a unit within the home that would be permitted and would be separated and have separate entrances or a shared entrance, but no outward changes that would suggest that there is anything different than a single family home. So there's a number of ways that we can regulate those, and we would foresee having very good design standards, spelling out where they're permitted, where they're not permitted, and then where they are permitted, subject to the design standards that we draft and you review and we ultimately adopt. Those could be approved administratively. There could be an annual review to make sure that everything's going well and to make any adjustments that may be necessary. And spelling all the standards, maximum size, minimum size, height, depending on district, depending on the existing house, driveways, parking, entrances, design, color, materials, all those types of things. And there are a lot of instances where there have been accessory dwellings added to historic structures as well. So that could be accommodated if it is the pleasure of the city. So all these lots that you see on this map, I know they're a little hard to see. They're different colors for the different existing zoning districts. Every lot that is shown here, and I don't know how many of them, but there's a few hundred, are non-conforming lots, meaning that these lots do not meet the minimum lot area of the zoning district that they're in. That doesn't sound like from staff that it has raised its head to cause too much problems, but at different times, I have experienced when I work for a city, floods of calls from realtors and from upset property owners that they're trying to refinance their home and they won't refinance it because it's non-conforming. And so they're forced to go through a variance process, get paperwork that takes time. They're frustrated. They're losing out on rates. Same thing with sale of property. So we don't want anybody in the community to have to go through that. So what we're looking at doing, one of two things, we're doing some analysis right now to figure out how much could we lower the lot size to take the most of these out. We're hoping we might be able to take a 9,000 square foot lot down to 8,500 or 8,400 or something like that and get a lot of those to go away. Your 6,500 square foot lots get down to 600 or 66,000 or 6,250. And again, try to get rid of many of these. So the lot sizes may be a little different than what you have in your zoning today. Obviously, as areas were annexed in, they were put into zoning districts, and we've kind of created nonconformities. So this was a great opportunity to relieve that burden on property owners and to make sure that we don't, create any additional problems and try to solve problems as we're drafting this ordinance. So the zoning districts, there's just simply too many today. They're not necessary. They're overly complicated. It's obvious that there has been Band-Aids over time with additions of PDs and PDOs and trying to figure out how can we allow different housing types in these districts. And, you get what's on the ground today. So we're looking at really stripping that all down, rethinking all the districts. Single family is permitted in every district across the city right now, even those that are intended for multifamily. So a lot of those that should have been multifamily units that would have increased population and count were built out with single family. So we're looking at not allowing single family in those districts anymore, zoning them for multifamily and allowing that area to redevelop over time, whereby, older single family homes, as they sell, they can be assembled into lots and build something that is high density. We'll talk about where that's at. Same way with 2 and 3 family townhomes permitted as a PDO, just added complexity that's really not needed. So we can dramatically simplify, make things a lot more straightforward and be a lot more deliberate about how the community is to develop and redevelop over the course of time. Just looking really quickly, I won't go through all the details, but the third column over is your current districts. The second column over is the proposed districts. There are a lot of districts that are in the code that there's only, like RS, for instance, there's only 2 lots in the entire city that are zoned RS. And they are non-conforming because they don't meet the minimum lot size of RS. So we think RS can go away, can be combined together with the RL district, which is 2 acres. That would take care of the 2 lots that are zoned RS right now. They would be zoned ACR or acreage residential. Your 2 acre RL district has a lot of homes or a lot of lots in it that are only 1 acre. So right now, those are all non-conforming. So either we leave it at 2 acres and make a statement that any home that exists as of the established or the effective date of this code is conforming, so that those 1 acre lots are not conforming. I would be cautious about reducing the lot size from 2 acres now down to 1 acre, because that would mean that 2 acres now could then split into 2 1 acre lots. That may not be a bad thing, but it would change the character of that area. And I know that area is special to a lot of folks. Same thing kind of goes with the RE and R1 districts consolidated into a large lot residential. These uses have identical uses, identical lot widths. There's really nothing to the naked eye that anybody would ever know the difference between a 21,780 square foot lot and a 25,000 square foot lot. There's really no difference, especially the way they are designed. So we can easily consolidate those and create the larger lot size so that we get rid of any nonconformities and so forth and so on. So we would basically have 5 residential zoning districts that would accommodate everything that you're doing right now with 10 districts. We would lose nothing. We would gain a lot in terms of simplicity and understandability, simplify the zoning map. There would be many fewer, as many as 50% fewer rezonings that are necessary because we're doing half the number of lots. So that allows green light development. So people can come into those zones and have everything spelled out for them, and they wouldn't have to worry about rezoning from RE to R1 because they want to have lots that are 3,000 square foot smaller. That, again, nobody can tell. It doesn't really have any impact. And lastly, just in terms of next steps, the next building block we'll be doing May 3rd is our 7th and final Envision Studio. We'll be focused on the remaining areas in the community in the southeast, primarily of your business and industrial, your employment districts. So that'll be the substance of that. We have another briefing with y'all on May 11th following that. And then we will be submitting the whole draft Unified Land Use Code on June 7th. And then you can see there we have joint leadership work sessions, city council work session. And I believe, what is it, Kathleen, we have until July 30th. So nearly 2 months of review time. So there will be plenty of time to review the substance of this code. So that was a mouthful. I appreciate your patience. Had a lot that's been going on in the last couple months since I've talked to you last. So I wanted to get that all out there. So with that, I know you're probably running short of time on this topic. I know you've got other agenda items, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that any of you have.
Great. Thank you, Brett, for the overview of this. Council, I'm looking for questions. I can always start a question here. I'll start out here, Brett, if you don't mind. In
Sure.
the earlier charts, you mentioned the 600, about 6,500 units. That's what it was. I wrote down my number wrong.
Right.
Estimated housing units in demand. Estimated, I know it's an estimate. What is the income level of those 6,500 housing units that are in demand?
That is an excellent question, Mayor. Of course, some of them are going to be, market rate. We need to start balancing out some of the housing units, and we're creating, a number of ways to do that. We don't see there being a lot of necessarily new single-family detached. We see there being an improvement of existing single-family attached, and redevelopment areas, as we've just shown, can be adding duplexes, things of that nature. According to the housing study, the 100% maximum affordable home price at the median household income is just under $300,000. Affordable would be defined by HUD as being 50%. So that is a maximum affordable home price of $150,000. So certainly, when you start increasing density, having smaller single-family units, the density goes up, the efficiency goes up, and the individual unit price goes down. We can, reduce or even allow waiver of certain standards. In a cottage cluster, we don't need 30-foot wide curb and gutter, back-to-back sidewalks on both sides, because they're the only people that are accessing that. So we can have, as long as we're providing for drainage, of course, We could have much narrower roads. You could potentially have a curb and gutter or even a rural street section. Again, depending on design of stormwater systems and conveyance and so forth, so that it's very doable to construct, 16 units or 18 units per acre and meet that price point. Those would be individual units. Of course, if we're building multiplexes where there are 4 units, whether they are condoed and individually owned or whether they are rental, we would suspect that those could easily be within that price range. Townhomes and row houses usually are, nicer. They're a little more expensive. So they may be a little above that. But again, we need a variety of housing types. We need a variety of places for people to live and a variety of unit types of different sizes so that we can hold the population.
Yeah.
So that is according to the housing study that the city.
I guess what I'm
had done.
thinking here is that I keep hearing the word affordable. So when we're talking 6,500 possible new housing units, it isn't just affordable. But so when we go forward on this, I want to make sure, are we looking at developing a mix? I don't want to just keeping low income, because I'm thinking low income. And I'm also thinking high
Yeah.
income, and then I'm thinking middle income. So, and I thought the HUD's definition of affordable was 30% or less of income was what HUD considers affordable, not 50.
That would be very low income. This would be low income. They define them differently.
Okay.
And like I said, in the housing study, it shows 150% of the median, which is 445,000 maximum home price, 100%, which is 300,000, and then 50% is the 150,000. We're not saying that 100% of all new homes must be affordable. We're saying that we need to make sure that we are zoning areas not allowing single family, so that when they develop, they will develop something attached or something multifamily. And then we know there's conversation about affordability. Kathleen can address this, but we figure that once we're done with the ULUC, that we may come back and kind of do a special study and draft ordinance for affordability that would spell out all the specifics and details about what that means for Littleton, the percentage, the range of units, the different types of units, their price points, and making sure that anybody that brings an application forward is going to have to show that out as to how they're going to meet the affordable
Great, thank you.
requirements.
Another question I have is, it said the overall, I think on your survey, and this might be for Kathleen, I'm not sure who, but the overall quality of housing dropped by 11%. About how many answered or responded to that question? Do you know?
So I think that's from our most recent, and I think we're usually in that like 800 responses.
Somewhere around?
Yeah,
So we're talking
it's part of the
a
National
reasonable number
Research
then.
Council, so it's a statistically relevant number. So that they're looking
so
at,
it was a good
we're
number.
always within that benchmark with each of the
Yeah,
years.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't
Yeah.
somewhere around like 50 or 60 respondents. So
No,
so you
that's-
got a pretty good number on it, it sounds
Yeah.
like. Okay.
Yeah, that's important, because if that is the impression of business owners, and many of the business owners are probably residents of Littleton, if that's their perception, then it's true, right? I mean, that's what their perception is going to be, and that's what outsiders' perceptions are going to be, and that's what the conversation is going to be. And of course, houses, as they age, they become tired. And unless people are, moving in or reinvesting in those homes and improving them, they kind of continue to devalue over the course of time as they age. So that's why it's important that in the zoning ordinance, we basically green light a lot of those things and say, hey, here's the things that you can do without requiring, obviously you'd have to get a building permit, but it wouldn't have to require any process. You demonstrate how you meet the standards that are spelled out in the ULUC. You come in, staff signs off on those, If you don't meet those requirements, staff directs those to commission and to council. So we make sure that everything is allowed to happen without creating any burden or any hiccup in the process.
Also, any other questions, council? Do you have any questions? Oh, let's go ahead and we'll go with Councilmember Milliman.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can, yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Brett, for the presentation tonight. I really appreciate all your hard work in putting this together. And I thought it was very telling when you said in one of the slides that within the next 5 years, 0 homes will be deemed affordable in the city of Littleton. And I will tell you right now, I believe the median price of a house in Littleton is $500,000. And my fear is if we don't take this opportunity, because we have an opportunity, we as this council, to update this code and change that trend. But it's kind of terrifying actually to think about that. And if we don't take this opportunity, my fear is we become a city of haves versus have-nots. So it's the very wealthy homes and very lower income. And what you're trying to tell us is we really need more attainable housing, more middle housing, a variety of housing options within the city. So I really do appreciate this topic tonight. But I did have a question on slide number 4. Could you just go over, it's in that top box, the housing stock current versus future? And just explain those numbers just a little bit.
Yeah. So this is the housing study results slide that has the 3 boxes on it. Is that what you're looking at, Kelly?
She's shaking her head, yes.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, sorry, I've got it up on my screen. I can't see you, Kelly. Yeah, so again, this comes directly from the housing study. So that is the source of it. They have spelled out the different types of housing that existed as of the date of the study. So there were 12,383 single-family structures. There were only 587 2 to 4 unit structures. And then there were 6,773 5-unit plus, so multi-family structures. So you've got right now about 61% single family, 34% multifamily. That's not bad for many communities that I see. So you've got quite a lot of apartment units where the big discrepancy is in that units that are 2 to 4 where you only have 587. And there were only 57 building permits over a 4-year period. And really, the way I see that is you haven't had anything in the zoning ordinance to date that describes that housing type. So, people wouldn't know to look for that. They didn't know that maybe was necessarily an option because it was kind of everything was lumped together in a single family attached. So they chose to build multifamily units. And so you've had this big gap. And so only 3% of your current housing stock is within that area. And all else being equal, without doing what we're doing right now, they were forecasted that it would remain the same 3% in the future. So over the course of time, you don't make any gain in that area of creating housing options that help to fill that gap and help to start make up the difference. You have some mobile home units. You have mobile home zoning, but these are not zoned mobile home. The mobile homes that you have are zoned, I believe, PDC, if I'm not mistaken. And so we're thinking, over the life of this unified code that with land values and so forth, that it's likely that area may redevelop with, homes that are, it may stay and it could stay forever, right? It would be grandfathered. But just thinking that as housing or as land prices continue to get more and more, they're going to be upside down, and they're going to see the property, the value of the property for redeveloping it. Right now, that's filling, part of the affordability equation for the community, and it may continue, or that may change. But we just need to make sure that when it changes, that we are still providing for affordable housing. So we're doing everything within our scope right now to lay out all the zoning districts, all the different housing types, to clearly define them, to remove single family from districts that are not intended to be single family, and to make them only for, attached or multifamily, and having all the districts. Then what we need to do is to come back and backfill right after we get done with all the heavy lifting on this, and write the affordability standards to, fill in all the gaps, do all the necessary analysis and study to make sure that the code gives specific guidance and specific regulations as to what must happen for the community to meet its goals. And I just want to emphasize that there's a stigma when people think about affordable, and most people think affordable is manufactured homes or apartments, and that it does not have to be the case. That's why if we can provide for townhomes, row houses that are on individual lots, so they can be individually sold and maintained as homeowners, as opposed to 6 units on one lot, that you're probably going to have an owner and they're going to rent out each of those, which, as long as you hold the owner's feet to the fire in terms of maintenance and care and so forth, that could work. The rental would probably be, would be affordable rental. It's just, you probably don't want, every housing unit across the city from this point forward all being rental. You'll want a balance of rental and ownership. So that comes down to the types of housing that we spell out that are available in the different districts.
Great. We'll get to
Did that answer your question?
It did, thank you.
We'll get to
Well,
Councilmember Fay, Driscoll, and Elrod.
Oh, affordability. I wish so much that we would, as a council, come up with an agreement of what affordability means. Right now, we are going all the way from homeless folks who have no income. And so what an affordable place to live for them would be absolutely free, to 20-somethings who call in and demand that we make it possible for them to buy the house that they grew up in, which is now worth $500,000. So who would make up the difference between what they could afford to pay in a mortgage, not much, if they are still in college, and $500,000. So we need to stop driving ourselves crazy and come up with a standard of what we're talking about when we mean affordable. I asked one of our frequent participants, a realtor, a year or so ago, what does affordable mean? And she said, affordable means anything that I, as a realtor, can find somebody who can buy it. And she says, Carol, for example, the neighborhood you live in, which is Oak Brook, is affordable to two-income professional couple. And that's what it was affordable for 33 years ago when I bought the house I'm now living in. It costs $113,000 then, but it was a stretch for me and my then husband, who were both 30-something professionals, to afford it.
Right.
For people to demand to be able to live in the house that they grew up in, it isn't realistic. unless they are of professional income and have another person who's going to share that mortgage with them. That's part one. So my bottom line with this is we are driving ourselves crazy trying to make Littleton, that 30 years ago was affordable for double income professionals. Not all of it, but certainly District 3. To make it affordable to anyone, including homeless people or 20-somethings who are single. Next thing, ADUs. Brett, I heard you say last night and today, both times, that ADUs are broadly supported. What I learned since then is what you were talking about is it's broadly supported by the people who were on that Envision studio.
That's correct.
And that was, you said in this meeting, roughly around 50 people. And so we're at about 50,000 in our population. So that means that 0.1% of our population weighed in on that. So of 1/10 of our population, ADUs are broadly supported by the majority of 50 people. I think you're misleading us on that. I don't understand why you're trying to sell us on ADUs, but that you're pointing out the good points. Let me point out some of the problems.
Yeah.
One, you say that there are ways to make them hardly visible from the street. Visible, right? From the street, right. Vehicles and traffic are going to come with those additional people. And so even though the ADU may not be visible, the vehicle that comes with that person or that couple will be visible, either in a garage, probably not, or on the street, maybe in the driveway. The noise that you mentioned, college students would be ideal for an ADU. College students are going to make noise. I know that's an assumption, but I'll just bet they're going to make some noise. Not visible, but definitely bothersome. Sewer is going to be taxed, not taxed as in money, but if you double the number of people on a property, you are doubling the amount of sewer, roughly, that is put in. Now you're saying that this is for aging parents. Okay, aging parents are going to be in that property, that ADU, for roughly 10, maybe 20 years. Let's say 10. That property then becomes a what? A rental for maybe students. So while mama, the aging parent, may be very quiet and may have just one vehicle, who knows what moves in there next? You mentioned aging in place, that people can't afford to stay where they are. I would say, and I'm speaking of District 3, so that's the southeast quadrant, 1/4 of Littleton. Many of the people here have already paid off their mortgage. So while their property taxes are going up, they aren't paying to live here as if they're paying rent. So they're really not going to get priced out of their property, as you were suggesting. More on ADUs is you're talking about from the street. In the neighborhood I live in, if I look around my property, I live in Oak Brook, so it's 500 houses that are affordable for a 2-income professional household. If ADUs were permitted, each property had one, I would have 21 ADUs visible from my house. 21 visible from my house. That completely changes the neighborhood. So we found out in our Envision interviews the summer of 2019 when lots of people were talked to, not just the 50 or so that tune in for the studios, we found out that preserving community character is what is really, really important. But if you take a neighborhood of 500 homes and make it so that every property or most of the properties have ADUs, you have completely changed a respectable neighborhood into a shanty town. It's not just from the street. The backyards abut each other. And I could have 6 ADUs adjacent to my backyard, the way things are aligned here, the properties are offset. 6 properties, and each of them could have an ADU. So you are missing the downside of the ADUs. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank-
if I can respond to that real
Oh,
quick.
yeah, sure.
In the Envision Studio, we're very well aware that it represents a small proportion of the population. And so that's the purpose of having meetings like tonight, so we can get with the elected leaders of the community, and, you know, working with staff and staff working with you and having that interplay back and forth. Going into last night, I made the statement that I suspected that there were a lot of neighborhoods across the city, based on the polls that we heard, where people said, quality neighborhoods and keep our neighborhoods our neighborhoods. I suspected that, I said there's going to be neighborhoods where these are not considered appropriate, where people don't want ADUs. I was countered by that by the people that were, all on the call, and everybody says, well, wait a minute. I live down on one of the 1 or 2 acre properties in the south part of the city, and I would love to have, an ADU. So you can't just say that it's Littleton Boulevard North or around the perimeter of downtown, because there's other areas. So the question that I was asking people is, I don't have any expectations that ADUs should be or could be approved citywide, that they're going to be limited to certain districts. You've got the R2 district that is the vast majority of the community, zoned R2, but single family, 6,500 square foot lots is what your zoning says, I believe. That covers a large percentage of the community. When you go to R3, again, still single family. I guess that's the 6,500. I think R2 is 9,000, excuse me. When you go to R3, those areas are concentrated more around downtown. There's a little bit south of Littleton Boulevard, and then there's a lot north of Littleton Boulevard. And of course, there's a mixture of housing types and apartments and so forth. So going into the evening, I said, from everything I'd heard up to that point, are these the areas, are the current R3 areas, which everybody had said before, are these the most appropriate? And generally people said, yeah, absolutely. It's close to transit, it's walkable, it's close to downtown. It allows for redevelopment, it allows for infill development, it allows for a lot of things. So if I gave the impression that I'm advocating, I'm certainly not advocating anything. Just saying what what the people who participated last night, what they told us. I was actually a little caught by surprise by that. I didn't expect that. I figured there would be a lot of people saying, yeah, leave my neighborhood alone. And that's easy to do. We can certainly do that. So it's just a matter of saying, if ADUs are permitted, what type of ADUs and where. And we could say and you're not going to see every single house in a neighborhood that takes advantage of an ADU. Some people have no reason for that. Some people don't have the room for that. Some people don't want the expense of that. Some people don't want the hassle of it. Well, you'll have a certain number of those that will say, you know, gee, I do have aging parents. I don't have a mortgage, so I can afford to, you know, do something that's nestled away above an existing garage or converting a garage or something. So we're not increasing the amount of impervious cover. We're not changing anything of that lot. We're just reutilizing a space within what was a garage, right? You're right in that perceivably they have, you know, a parking place. They don't have to have a parking place. We talked about maybe having 3 parking places instead of 2 that would be required in a single family. And that would be part of what would be required. If they're not able to park it on site, they're not able to gain approval. So it's just as simple as that. So nothing's been drafted, no decisions have been made. This is entirely up to, you know, all of you giving us direction. We're sharing with you what we heard last night. I don't disagree with you. I think there are many neighborhoods that are wonderful neighborhoods, and people like them as they are, and they wouldn't want to see ADUs at all. And if that's the case, that's absolutely fine. We just need to define those on a map so that those will be zoned differently than places where it's decided that, yeah, ADUs could work here. And again, remember I spelled out the 4 different types of ADUs. Doesn't have to be that all 4 are permitted everywhere. It could be that in this district, only interior ADUs are permitted. We don't allow anything else. In other districts, we could say, you know, all 4 of these are available. You know, here's the standards for all 4 of them. You have to demonstrate with, you know, site plan, building plans, how you meet the standards. And if you meet the standards, then you could pull a permit and proceed. They would all be limited to a percentage of the rear yard, or, you know, the lesser of a percentage of the rear yard, or X number of square feet. So, you know, they wouldn't be double the size of the house. They would be very modest relative to the house. Talking about maybe 30% of a rear yard. Maximum size you can get might be 700-800 square feet, smaller. So it's proportional to the district and to the lot area. So I appreciate your comments, Carol. I totally agree with you that what we heard last night was not 100% representative. So I'm glad to hear it tonight. So we know as we are drafting that even though there's some people that say, hey, make them everywhere, there's a lot of folks in town that say, no, we don't want them in our neighborhood.
Great. Thank you, Brett. Thank you. City Manager, we are going to be talking ADUs in a future date, are we not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have an opportunity to dig into this one here pretty heavily here at some point here after the draft. I think what Brett is trying to share with you is kind of where the public sentiment is going here through that, the process itself. But obviously, council will have to make some decisions about how relevant that is and if there are exceptions. And I think that's what Brett's trying to tee up here.
Great, thank you. And she brought up, Councilmember Fay brought up many good points, and a lot of them will have to be addressed sometime. I think what she did bring up is that this is just not a shoe-in that we all are thinking on the same page on this. I think there's a variety of us thinking out here, and we represent our constituents, and we all hear from them. So with that, we'll go to Councilmember Fay. Were you finished with your questions, weren't you? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
Councilmember Driscoll, then Elrod.
Yeah, Carol, great points. I just caution both council and the public out there to let's not look through this city with rose-colored colored glasses. I believe I'm a realist. I'm in the mortgage industry. I've been in the construction industry, and you know, if the figure's correct at $500,000, the average home, you know, that means if you tear down a home, you're buying a lot for $500,000. And then when you build that new place, that 4-plex or 6-plex, you earned it for $1.5 million, $2 million. You know, I don't see how it becomes affordable. So again, the market, I think we've missed the market. I remember moving to Colorado in '85, and I could afford it, bought anything down Cherry Creek. I can't buy down Cherry Creek right now, you know. Everybody wants to live in Cherry Creek or Cherry Hills or wherever, but you know what? The market speaks, and you go with what the market allows you to afford. So mine was not really so much a question, Brent, but just a point that I wanted to make about, are we trying to be everything to everybody? And in my opinion, we have to go down this road of what's realistic. Thanks.
Great, thank you. We have Councilmember Elrod and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Let's see, I will start with, I agree with Councilmember Driscoll on, the ship has sailed, to a certain degree on this affordability, or I don't even want to give it the word affordability, the 0 and 1% that was represented on the slide. We have to recognize that, to get that 1% or that zero prediction to anything of any substance is just not attainable in Littleton. We have limited land. We are 20 miles, from Denver, or less than 20 miles. So we are in a prime area that just the land alone could never be affordable. So I just don't think it's realistic for us to pursue something that is not viable. What I think is realistic and very much in character and spirit of Littleton, I would say, is that missing middle. I think that's, Brett, you said it, it's not just Littleton. This is a universal phenomenon in the United States, but I do think there's something unique about Littleton that lends itself really well to that type of development, both in the type of people that seek out living in Littleton or working in Littleton. And we do have some examples of that even in Littleton, I think. And that's what we hear more and more about, of what people are looking for. So they're looking more for that type of living environment, focusing less on what the cost may or may not be and where it falls on the scale, but how that type of development, how they live. Because it's smaller, it's accessible, it's, in the neighborhoods they want. So I do want us to make sure that we are looking for ways to achieve more and more of that and less of the multifamily. So I think we're at the right balance now. It was kind of the 60-40 split that feels like the right balance of single family versus multifamily. If there's any shift in percentage, I think that shift needs to be building up the missing middle as opposed to building up multifamily to gain the greater number of units that we need in our city to help support the population growth. The other thing I want to make a comment on is on the business survey, where one of the comments was that, they didn't have enough affordable housing for their employees. I'm sorry, I'm going to pause for a second.
While she's pausing there for a second.
I had to.
Karina,
I had to just make sure the movies weren't going on the background.
Karina, if you could just hang on just 1 second. Okay, cool. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Karina,
Okay,
continue.
sorry. Okay, so the second point is on the business survey. There was a comment that there's less affordability for their employees. So another way to rectify that, or another way to look and consider that for us as a city and a community, is how do we begin attracting more businesses that are higher paying jobs and more corporations that have a professional workforce. So the solution there isn't just one-sided on creating the housing, but it's more holistic of creating the employment and economic opportunity. So I caution us to, or ask us to look at it from an economic development perspective as well, and not just to solve for on housing. The third comment that I'd like to make is on accessory dwelling units. And, I think there's a little bit of, So, to say that 50 people isn't, indicative of a general population, well, what is the number? Because, 10 people, we had big discussions about short-term rentals, and that was maybe 10 people, and here it's 50. So we can't get caught up on what's good enough. Is one voice not, significant because there isn't 10 or 50? I don't think there's a way to statistically, in the way we conduct our business, to say, no, in this case, it's not enough. I think we have to recognize that the purpose of how we've been going about our community engagement has always been a sampling, a pulse, and we get it individually. So this is not the first time that we've heard about accessory dwelling units. We have had individuals come to our meetings over the past, 3 years that I've been here. So it's come up even when not prompted. So that says something. I think what we experienced with COVID this past year, especially with such high risk of health concerns for elders to be in an environment that is so dense and so contained. There have been so many families that have taken their elders out, their parents, et cetera, out of those, institutions. And that's probably not a good word to use at all. Sorry for that. But those environments, and looking for a way to bring them back to their home, to, an accessory dwelling unit has been what people have tried to do and haven't been able to do in Littleton and many other places. I think to relook at accessory dwelling units as a way to solve for gaining greater diversity in housing, getting greater access to housing is actually a very good alternative for a city like Littleton, which is not going to be supportive of your 10 stories or even 5 stories for that matter. And, whether it is a college student, an older parent, doesn't change its purpose and its use. So I am very encouraged and look forward to hearing more of how ADUs can solve for many issues in the community. And quite honestly, I almost look at it as how it will create opportunities in our community. When we look at cities like South Pasadena, which is like, one of a poster stamp of great work that they've done on historic preservation and work that they've done on maintaining the character of their neighborhoods, ADUs are now allowed in South Pasadena. So that says a lot. So I don't think we should shy away from this conversation. And I think we should embrace this opportunity for our city. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Brett, for your presentation. I guess I just want to make what I hope is a simple point about the processes around council's long-term decision-making. Because some of what I'm hearing in our discussion tonight suggests to me that maybe we still think it's an open policy discussion about meeting this need for additional housing units. And I suppose in a very literal sense, yeah, it's up to 4 council members to say, no, we don't want to meet the need for 6,500 additional units. Let's move on to the next topic. But we have to remind ourselves how we've gotten to this point, which is we adopted the findings of the BBC housing study, and we also incorporated those findings in many ways into the comprehensive plan. And so from my perspective, the question is resolved. We have an obligation that our community has charged us with to meet the need for 6,500 additional housing units. I think that we have, as a community, very often said, we don't like change, so we are going to resist change. And then change happens to us inevitably, and we don't like the result, and we become resentful. Change is going to happen, and we need to manage it, right? That has been the recurring theme that this council has heard over and over and over again, right? We need to remind ourselves that that comprehensive plan is our touchstone, that to meet the long-term goals and needs of our community that we have been charged with, we have to get to 6,500 units. Now, it needs to be diverse, right? It needs to include market rate housing, affordable housing, small housing, big housing, tiny homes, ADUs, mixed use housing, right? Because that's the message that we have gotten from our community. We need diverse housing stock, and we need an additional 6,500 units. So I would hope that as an exercise in sort of hewing to the long-term decision-making process that we've all agreed on as a community, which is comprehensive planning, that we would largely consider this question of meeting that need for 6,500 additional units resolved and get on with the business of talking about, okay, what do we want it to look like? Where do we want it to go? What variety do we want it to be? What affordability levels do we want it to meet? Do we want it to be market? Do we want it to go in this district or that district? I think those are the questions that really we need to be talking about. But I just wanted to, I guess, remind us of that, because some of the things I was hearing in the conversation, it sounds like, well, some of the old stuff that has caused so many problems in the community, that we don't like change, we resist change, and then change steamrolls us. I think we really need to make a conscious effort to execute comprehensive planning in Littleton as a way to manage growth. So that's all.
Councilmember Grove, and then me.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. With respect to ADUs, I think it's a big topic. I think I look forward to the conversation, what staff brings forward. One of the things that came up in the breakout session that I'd like to think about, that when we get to it in the summer, is ADUs and STRs. So not advocating either way, just put it in the mix. Second thing I wanted to talk about is we talked a lot about housing, different types of housing, specifically affordable housing, and I feel like I'm finally getting a handle on what tools council has for affordable housing. I think it's a big conversation, and I think we want to look at it strategically. And if Kendra Keys can get us set up so that we are in a position to have multi-types of housing, affordable and otherwise, and have the right zoning, so that when we get to that conversation of affordable and different types, we are in a position to make those decisions to help our city have the type of housing for everybody. But it's not, it can't be done in isolation. It has to be done as a large thing. And the last point to go along with that, as we develop our housing, compatibility and design guidelines are going to be so key to making sure we have that character in our neighborhood that people associate with making Littleton unique. Whatever, the places where it's more historic, the places where it's less historic, single family, whatever, that we make sure that we maintain that compatibility, that character through design guidelines.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you very much. A couple things I'm just going to just throw out there, and I think we're ready to wrap this subject up, if I'm not mistaken. First of all, thank you for the study and all the information that you gave us, Brett. It's good information. I do want to remind people that he is a consultant, he's a professional, and we do pay him to do this, so it's not like he's doing it out of the goodness of his heart. So he's a professional, and he provides us with information that we ask for. So I really appreciate the information you provided. Thank you, Kathleen, for clarifying that we had about 700 people, whatever the number was. I think that's a substantial number when we do surveys. I think that's far better than we used to do in past years.
And just to clarify, I did go back and look. So we had 703 on the resident survey and then 102 on the business survey.
Okay.
So I think both of those are within about a 6%, which is statistically viable. That's hard to get out.
Thank you. I think that was good. It was a good number, whatever it was. Also want to point out in one of the slides in there that we were provided, it said that the convenience, moving to Littleton was a convenience as far as locating here in Littleton. That number goes down substantially after the people get out of their 20s. As they start making more income, living close to where they work may not be as a priority. And now, today, with our more people working at home, and for many, that's not going to change. Many will be going back to work, but there's also many that won't be going back to an office permanently situation. The city manager and I, as well as the mayor pro tem, had that brief conversation on that yesterday. Even how the city does business is likely to change. I do have a question on demographics, and maybe this is for Brett. As far as demographics in Littleton getting older, am I mistaken? Is that a trend just in Littleton, or is it also Colorado and also the United States?
Yeah, it is a national trend, obviously, because of the baby boom generation. And so we've been watching it for, 20 years. You've seen this big swell of the baby boom generation. And as years pass by, it keeps moving through the time period. And, it's those people in that cohort are all, starting to retire now. I think I'm right on the very last year of the baby boomers, and I'm 55. So we've got another 10 years, and the baby boomers are going to all be retired.
Yeah, I guess my point is that it's not just Littleton that is aging. I think it's across the board everywhere. I'm trying to get through this real quick on some things, yes, observations that I had. And I thought it was also interesting that while we may want duplexes, but we don't want them to look like duplexes because it might change the neighborhoods. That's something that we want to always keep in mind. So that was a good information you had there as well. Let's see, and just my experience too with illustrations, and thank you for those illustrations on examples of what a lot may look like, whether it's an ADA or ADU or whatever. But my experience is that the illustrations always show more space than reality. So that's something to always keep in mind, council, as well as for our public. And I thought I heard you say, and I think I'm wrong on this one, Brett, but on the non-conforming lots, that's saying that if somebody has a half-acre unit with one home on there, but it's zoned so that it could actually fit two homes. So are you suggesting that those few neighborhoods that are like that they may want to start changing as well in order to meet this total goal that is an estimate of 6,500 housing units?
Yeah, so for instance, if the zoning district has a minimum lot size of 9,000 square feet, through GIS, we identified all the lots within that zoning district that were less than 9,000 square feet. So they don't meet the minimum. So they would be non-conforming. And those were what were shown on that map. The same thing was done for each of the other zoning districts. So we're doing the analysis now. I'm hopeful that, when we come with the draft, that if it used to be 9,000 square feet, maybe it's 8,700, maybe it's 8,600 or whatever. And that will basically eliminate a lot of the nonconformities. I don't envision it'll be anything dramatic that is going to change overall density where you start splitting lots and things like that. But I think that's pretty easily resolvable.
Well, thank you, Brett. Again, I'm going to try to wrap up this subject. We did discover that we have lots of conversation on the ADUs and what is affordable and things like that. So, again, Kathleen or City Manager?
Maybe just as a wrap-up.
Oh, and we do have a council member. Let's go to Council Member Elrod. She has one last comment. Then we'll get to City Manager. I'm sorry.
So super quick. So one quick question for Brett. The images that you showed us of like the cottage homes, the duplex, et cetera, were those shared during the studios as well? Or they were?
Yeah, it was part of the presentation last night.
Okay, so the one view that you showed of a duplex that actually had the doors in the front, but it was, and you actually mentioned that it was very nicely done. So how do you balance that? Something like that actually does fit within the character. It is really nicely done. But to say, no, that can't be possible because we were so adamant of saying, no, the doors have to be on the right. So that just I'd like you to consider the intent and spirit of that feedback of fitting in with the character, with the risk of forcing a certain placement of a door to be just as simple as that, and then kind of losing the opportunity for great architecture. So I don't want to completely throw something out the window because of that specificity.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope, right? So if you say it's okay to have two doors on front, then everybody's going to do that. And then across the neighborhood, it really, starts to change the character of that neighborhood. So that's, if there was an exception and council said, hey, that's okay, we understand the layout of the building, we'll grant that exception. Awesome. But we'll certainly look at that. I appreciate that comment that we can't be so rigid that it can't be done. So
Great, thank you. Councilmember Fay has one question, then I'm turning over to the city manager.
Since we're prolonging this conversation rather than moving on, I would like to ask, why is it we are concentrating only on the appearance from the street, such as Councilmember Elwood just brought up, instead of also including how increasing density taxes the infrastructure, such as adding to sewer, adding to internet demand, adding to traffic, adding to parking. Why, and this is truly a why, not a rhetorical why, but what is it in your thinking, Brett, that makes it preferable not to look at those infrastructure issues that cost the city a tremendous amount of money?
Yeah, you raise a very good point. So generally, when cities are thinking about growth and thinking about fiscal sustainability, they're looking to infill development where there's already infrastructure, there's already schools, there's already parks, there's already sidewalks, there's already streets. So the most efficient thing we could do would be to utilize the infrastructure that we have and optimize it, frankly. So that's really a question for your public works folks as to what the capacity is, and that may be a limit, frankly. Again, I wouldn't expect just because the zoning ordinance says that you can have an ADU that the next day we're going to have 10,000 applications for ADUs. I would suspect it'll be kind of here and there, and over the course of time it'll maybe add up, but we're not going to see a dramatic change just because the UDO allows it. From a character perspective, character is your visual impressions. So when you drive through a neighborhood, every neighborhood has a look and feel. And that is because of the physical dimensions of that, the width of the street, how far the homes are set back from the street, the separation between the homes, whether they have detached or attached driveways, whether they have an alley providing access. Those things distinguish your neighborhoods in terms of their character. So when we talk about allowing for changes, and those changes would be, adding or using the above a garage for an ADU, the garage is already there. They're just utilizing the top portion of it for an ADU. It's not going to really change the character. We're not talking about going from having no garage to building a garage that's taller than the house, that is bigger than the house, and calling that an ADU. That would not be an ADU. An ADU is going to be, much lesser than the maximum, or the principal dwelling unit, rather.
All right.
So if we put an ADU in a backyard, you're right. There's going to be some modest amount of increased sewer for a person who might live in that ADU. They're going to be small. You're not going to have families of 10 living in them. So you might have one or maybe two. So the amount of additional water or sewer is going to be pretty nominal.
Brett, I'm going to ask if you could hold off. And Carol, you have one more question, I know, because we're going to be doing an ADU conversation soon. But Carol, I know you have another question.
Right, Brett, going back to a couple years ago, I think when it wasn't you, but Gary Mitchell, who was working with us, but he works for you. So I think it's a fair question to ask you. Gary was characterizing a number of neighborhoods as being pretty heavy on vehicles, either in the driveways or on the street. And those neighborhoods were knocked down in preferability because of the vehicles. It seems that when you add an ADU, you are going to add at least one vehicle. Even if the aged mother-in-law doesn't drive the vehicle, or he is going to have one, then you have increased the number of vehicles. And there also could be an RV or a boat that comes with that person. So you have changed the community character by adding an ADU, which you're saying doesn't change the community character. But it does add vehicles, which Gary Mitchell taught us does change the community character.
I think that's good points, and that's a fact, too. Because I know in my neighborhood, we had one that was added for a mother-in-law, and she has since gone, and they've sold a home, and now there's at least 6 cars in the driveway and street. So if I could, I'd like to, unless you can give us a short answer, I'd really like to wrap this thing up.
Well, I'll just say that I'll let you have your conversation on ADUs. I'll communicate with staff. We'll take direction from you. I feel like there's a role for ADUs in the community. It's a question of what type of ADUs, where, and then we can write good design guidelines and standards to limit them. There's nothing that's saying that we can't say you can only have one ADU per, 500 or 700 square feet. We don't have to allow every single lot to have an ADU. So there's a number of different ways that we can address that. So
Great.
I'm not concerned by it. We'll draft and then we'll get your comments and we'll make the
Great.
necessary edits.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. With that, Mark, please.
Well, I think Kathleen is prepared to kind of summarize what we heard here. Can we do that quickly? I don't want to, okay.
Rapid fire.
Let's see if we can summarize this. We're trying to take notes.
Right, so we did have the conversation about the 6,550 housing units and focus those on the goal in the comprehensive plan, which is quantity and diversity of housing options that make living in Littleton attainable for a wide range of age groups and income levels. So I think that our conversation tonight definitely echoes that, both the agreement of how we're defining affordable, but also the understanding that those 6,000 units represent a diversity for both the housing type and income levels. We heard a lot of conversation tonight about ADUs, which we look forward to having more conversation with council and bringing some specifics from the ULUC to help guide that conversation. And then we also heard an interest in focusing on that missing middle this evening and finding the right balance. Maybe has been struck between multifamily and single-family home was a reaction that we heard this evening. We did hear about sort of both sides of the different types of housing. We heard some conversation about managing change, the commitment we've made both through the comprehensive plan and our dedication to the housing study. We know that there is some additional conversation relative to short-term rentals, particularly if we were to explore and introduce any ADUs in the city. And then we've heard a lot about compatibility, which we know is going to be very focused on the design standards that we outline in the ULUC. But I think all of this conversation has really teed up a very nice segue into introducing our members of the Housing Task Force for our next agenda item. So thank you all. And then did I miss anything?
Yeah, Council, was there anything else? Good summary. Thank you. City Manager.
Thank you all very much for your time, and to the folks that are there from the Housing Subcommittee, I apologize for keeping you so late.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Brett.
Nothing on my end, Mayor.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much. With that, Council, it is 8:34. So let's come back at 8:45. Welcome back to our city council meeting. It is 8:45. We are now on item number 2, thank you. ID number 21-045, an update on our housing task force. And again, council, this isn't to change anything or to give any direction. It is just to get an update on where we are on this. So, city manager, so, thank you.
All right, maybe just a quick introduction here. I think our conversation we just had with Brett Keast, I thought set a pretty good foundation for what the code could do to, allow for some opportunities. Obviously, the council's got a goal specific to affordable housing here in May, can't remember the exact date, but that is an opportunity, I think, to bring this briefing here by our task force to more information, and so that we can ultimately look at a strategic goal here for the next couple of years or longer as we approach a pretty complex issue. I think we're all understanding that this is going to take some time to sort through. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kathleen. I know she's going to make a quick introduction. Thank you.
Yes, good evening again. So we have members of our Housing Task Force. As you remember, the Housing Task Force has been around for a number of years here to help provide both recommendations, do some of that legwork and research for the city. So part of their presentation tonight will just be a quick reminder of the relationship that you've had with the Housing Task Force. But this evening, we're joined by members of the task force, Kate Hilberg, Kyle Henderson, Eric Veith, and Corey Reitz. And again, we're really valuing our partnership with the South Metro Housing Options as they're staffing this housing task force, but the membership of the task force itself is much, much broader than just affordable housing. So they really are helping us with that long-term goal of housing and how that fits in our overall plans. So I think that I am turning it over to Corey to kick off the presentation. Is that right? I see him nodding. So let's get underway, right?
All right. Thank you, Kathleen. I'm going to share my PowerPoint, and I think the plan for this presentation is that we will present some information and take some breaks in between for discussion and questions. So it won't be a full presentation and questions at the end. We'll kind of discuss some of these items as we go.
You let us know when you want to stop for questions.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. How's that?
We see it.
Okay. Thanks. All right. So we thought it'd be important to just start out by giving a reminder of the time frame, the timeline, and a little bit of history about the task force. Task force, like Kathleen said, has been around for a few years. It started back when City Council decided to commission the housing study, which was completed by BBC in 2017. Along with the housing study then came a set of recommendations that eventually were incorporated into the comprehensive plan that was adopted in October of 2019. So the purpose of the task force is really to help the city and city council meet the needs of the community as identified in the comp plan. The housing study and the comp plan are really our guiding documents and what we're working off of. The task force is specifically called out in the comprehensive plan. I believe it's referred to as the Housing Advisory Committee. So that's really where most of our work comes from and will continue to. We understand that city staff, city council have an awful lot on your plates. So the idea of the task force is really to provide the experience, expertise, and the capacity to work off of that chapter in the comp plan, the housing and neighborhoods chapter, to help address some of the housing challenges and issues that we do have in Littleton. Just to be clear, I think Kathleen mentioned it, the Housing Task Force is a separate entity from South Metro Housing Options. While we do have staff and board members as part of the group, which does make sense since we have such a strong partnership with the city and meeting the housing goals of the city, but they are separate entities. So on our task force, we have several real estate and development professionals, both for-profit and nonprofit. We have housing, SMHO staff and board members. We have a small business owner. We have representation from the city, staff, city council, and the county. We also have another leader of a nonprofit in the community. And the vast majority of our task force members are citizens of Littleton. So we think that's also very important. And also that the task force is not meant to be a short term, just help with the ULUC process and be done. It's actually a long-term, at least that's the idea is for it to be a long-term group to help, again, just work off of the comp plan and help meet the needs of the community. And one of the primary reasons the housing task force is needed is the huge change in affordability in Littleton over the years. Whether we're talking about the affordability of rental units or for sale units. I think Brett mentioned it earlier that the wages in Littleton have not kept up with housing prices, not even close. So that's created such a huge gap and really created a burden for a lot of families who would sure like to live in Littleton, or if they are living in Littleton, very well may be cost burdened when it comes to their housing costs. And housing, I like to remind folks that housing's not, you may have heard me say it before, but it's not an island unto itself. That housing, especially affordable housing, certainly impacts a lot of areas, other areas in the community, whether it's community health, economic impact on the city. Education is a big one, especially with LPS being such a huge draw to Littleton. With the last update of the data from the housing study, showing a continued decrease in families with children in Littleton. I think that's important to keep in mind when we're talking about, again, LPS, and it may be housing for teachers as well. And then if we think about academic achievement, that also is very closely related to stable and affordable housing. So, and traffic and transportation is probably the more obvious area that is very interconnected to housing. So just a couple of items we've been working on. ULUC is probably the most obvious. We've just been looking at different types of housing that make sense in Littleton and that are feasible, that would help address the housing needs in Littleton, both for today and for the future. We've also begun to look at inclusionary housing ordinances and policies that might be a good fit for the city. This issue depends a lot on what happens at the state legislature. There's a bill currently being discussed that would may give jurisdictions more flexibility in the ordinances that are able to be created. So we've been looking at potential consultants, and Brett mentioned that they may be a part of this process as well. And a much bigger issue that is definitely in the back of our minds is homelessness. It's a huge undertaking, and there are a lot of groups working on it currently. Tri-Cities Homelessness Group, for one. So we're kind of waiting we don't want to repeat the work that others are doing and other groups. So we're waiting to see how some of those items and studies turn out before we really start focusing on that. But it's definitely on our radar. And in general, we're just researching the different options available in addressing the housing needs in Littleton, as identified in the comprehensive plan. As we all know, there are no simple answers. It's such a complicated and challenging issue that it does take a lot of time and energy, but we're happy to be able to help. And going forward, we really need to know and would like to know what we can do to further support city staff and city council. So that is our first section. Are there any questions? I would like to hopefully very briefly address Councilmember Fay and Councilmember Elrod's comments on affordability and what it means. That is definitely the age-old question, and it's not easy to answer. But in my mind, especially in a community like Littleton, where the housing costs have continued to rise, affordable housing means what is affordable in my mind. Councilmember Elrod mentioned the missing middle. That also is affordable housing. It's just one of the groups. So the Housing Task Force is not focused on any one particular group. We're not focused on low income. We're not focused solely on the missing middle. It's really the whole spectrum of incomes and ages across the different AMI levels, whether it's 30% AMI or 120% of AMI. Because as the data from the housing study has shown, there really are multiple levels all across the spectrum that are not currently affordable and are getting less affordable in Littleton. So I don't know if that helps at all, but.
Great, thank you. Council, do we have any questions at this time? We have Councilmember Grove.
I have a comment. As we move to talk about more of what we can do as a council, because we're limited in what we can do with respect to affordable housing. We've talked about what we can do with the code and set us up for success. But I almost want a laundry list. And I've accumulated one on my own, but it doesn't have the ramifications like changing density, changing occupancy. There's a lot of things that we can do with ordinance to help facilitate this. And I guess I want it all in one place. So if you're asking what would help us make decisions, that's one thing that would help me make a decision when it comes to that point in time.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Fay.
I'm still looking for a definition or at least parameters for what we mean when we talk about affordable. What is it we are trying to accomplish? And so I'm going to list off some levels here, and not to put Corey on the spot in particular, but Corey as the kingpin of the whole affordability question. And Corey, you're in a position to drive us or lead us to an answer of this. What are we trying to do? Are we trying to provide housing for everyone who wants it or needs it? If we are, then we need to have housing for people who can pay nothing. And we need to have housing for people who just got out of high school and want to be able to buy a house in the neighborhood they grew up in. Do we want to make it a place that attracts low-paying employers so that low-paying employers can come to Littleton and have Littleton subsidize the difference between what they pay and what it costs to live? That's another possibility. Do we want to fill Littleton public schools with kids who are just kids, to get them here to fill up the schools for some reason? Do we want to change Littleton to something it hasn't ever been yet? At least, and I'm talking about District 3. District 3 has been developed as a place for double income professionals to live for the most part. We want to change it. Those same houses, those same properties, do we want to make them into properties where a single 20-something can afford to live? I'm not saying any of those is wrong. I'm saying we need to decide what we're trying to do, because right now we're trying to do everything that anyone can imagine, and we are not doing it well. Corey, what are we trying to do?
Well, I think from a very general point of view, one of the 5 core values identified in the comp plan is inclusivity, and which, the corresponding comment is a range and mix of housing choice for Littleton, and that inclusivity is a core value. So in my mind, that does mean, like I mentioned earlier, I think a very wide range, because the affordability is so challenging here. It's not just about trying to meet the needs of the 30 to 40% AMI folks like maybe it was years ago. So in general terms, if Littleton does value inclusivity, and it seems it does as part of the core values, and only 5 core values, then it does mean the whole spectrum again of incomes. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, then Corey, where does the money come from to do that? If I, let's say I want to leave Littleton and my house is valued at $500,000. It's for sale and it needs to go to someone who can afford to pay $100,000 for it. Where does that $400,000 come from to let that person have this house for $100,000 and to compensate me for the fact that my property is worth $500,000? Where does that money come from?
So if you don't mind, maybe that question can be saved till later, because we're going to walk through some of the options that we think will help the whole housing issue in general and help address those needs. So maybe we can come back to that once we get through some of those, more of the how-tos.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Sure.
Keep that question on your mind there, Carol. Thank you. Any other questions from council? Nope. Carrie, that's it. Dead air, man.
All right.
It's never good for business.
Can you hear me?
We hear you.
Excellent. This is Kate Hilberg, and I am on the Housing Task Force. I'm also the Director of Real Estate Development for Habitat for Humanity of Metro Denver. So I'm one of the affordable housing developers on the group. And I'm going to walk you through, as a housing task force, what have we learned? Obviously, Littleton needs more housing. The data from the housing study and the refresh and the direction from the comp plan is clear. But anecdotally, anyone following the market here can see the pent-up demand for housing. Littleton homes don't sit on the market, and they also sell for more than list price. There's just not enough housing to keep up. Corey, could you go to the next slide, please? So we've learned that Littleton needs more kinds of housing as well. So we, as part of what we've done, is we've gotten out and we've actually talked to folks to find out what Littleton residents want and what their needs are for housing. We've asked these questions of people we know, our friends, our family, our coworkers, and frankly, even ourselves. We have renters of all ages, family sizes, and incomes living in Littleton. They work in Littleton. They're small business owners in Littleton. They're here because they want their children to have the advantages of an LPS education. But there are not a lot of options for these folks to size up, size down, purchase a starter home, or even purchase a larger home from someone who it no longer suits. We have an aging group of homeowners who would like to downsize. Their homes feel empty and it has fulfilled its usefulness in their lives, but they want to stay in Littleton. They want to be close to their kids, their friends, their community, and there aren't a lot of options for them either. There's not a lot of smaller, low maintenance homes available for sale in Littleton. In fact, our community doesn't even allow much of this building type. Corey, you want to go to the next slide? So, why are we dealing with these issues? Some of these pressures are not within our control. In the next 30 years, the Denver metro area is projected to add 600,000 households. Littleton's going to get their share of some of that. The wages of the folks we depend upon, most of our, mostly in our daily lives, our teachers, our mailmen, their wages are just not keeping up with the high real estate prices that are driven by the demand for housing here. Next slide, Corey, please. But there are issues that are within our control. We can change land use to allow residential development in the corridors, but not all folks who want to stay in Littleton or move to Littleton want to live in the corridors in mixed-use development opportunities. those will appeal to a lot of people and will be a draw for them. But there really isn't a clear path for those who would like to build new housing in the neighborhoods in Littleton. And that's where, our look at the ULUC and working with that group is really important. For example, there's a vacant 1 acre site currently zoned R3 in Littleton, which sits adjacent to some small duplexes and a few single family homes. And under that R3 zoning, about 6 homes should be allowed to be built on this site. But due to the current constraints that are written into the code, only 2 single family homes could be built there with any certainty by any developer. So that's 1 single home on almost a ½ acre of land. So many families who are looking to live here, to own a house here, don't have the time or resources to steward such a large piece of land. Now, the surrounding comps for this parcel wouldn't support a large high-end home on this parcel either, where you would suspect that the owners could have maybe some more wealth to help keep up the acreage. So a much better fit for a parcel like this might be a cluster of duplexes or smaller homes for starter homes. And, a developer currently they could pursue a PD to try to provide something like this, something modest in scale and affordable. But the financial risk of failure in this city is extremely high right now. So basically nothing happens. We have land that could support housing that lies vacant. And that really leads to part of the issue, which is, how do we overcome the perception that new housing is a threat to community character and truly show our value of inclusivity? And so we'll be moving on to that, but we want to take a pause here to see if there's any questions at this point or comments.
Council, we have any questions? Councilmember Milliman.
Hi, Kate. Thank you. So could you elaborate a little bit on the perceptions of housing as a threat to community character? As Carol has talked earlier about the definition of what is affordable, I'd love to know what the definition is of community character, because I think it means something to each of us. It's different, and to each of us, I mean, it's defined in the comp plan. But I hear you, and I agree with you that sometimes I feel like there is a perception that new housing is somehow a threat to our community character. And so I wanted you just to elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure. And I think, as you're sort of mentioning it as well, there's, the community character that's the built environment. And then there's a perception of change, any kind of change, right, could be deemed a threat, or it could be people that don't have the same incomes as us, or people that just don't look like us. It can kind of take on all different connotations if you don't define character. And if we could stick to a definition, maybe something like Brett talked about, where you're talking about scale and repetition and width of streets and things like that, that becomes a very clear definition to use to combat any kind of perception of fear, because you can have design guidelines that help you achieve that. But I think that a lot of folks in our community use that community character differently than kind of as the built environment piece. Does that answer your question, Kelly?
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Councilmember Elrod, then Faye.
Thank you, Kate, for your perspective and considerations that we need to think about. But of course, we're not at the level of expertise or detail to see things in some of this, in the light that you're sharing with us today. So 2 points in particular. I think the point that you made regarding, this isn't a solve for just in all the corridors. And I don't want to say just in all the corridors. That should never be considered. We will only solve for this and assume that this housing variety or housing affordability, attainability in all its forms is being solved for at the corridor. So I think that is a comment that I'd like to direct to our staff to just ensure that we're not using the corridors alone as a solve for this, and I don't believe we are. The second comment was this example that you have of the 1 acre lot. And how do we systemically identify these opportunities? Because it's difficult, right? So 1 acre lot here is not the same as another acre lot there. So how do we identify that throughout our city to truly say, here's how we should develop this area? And the challenge is, and Brett brought this up earlier, we have from R1s to R5 to, there's so many different zones and so many non-conforming. So it's difficult. So without someone specifically looking at lot by lot, it seems like it's hard to develop new zoning or new code that helps us recognize and make possible the example that you have here. So maybe you can comment on any thoughts you might have from a development point of view, and I'd love to hear some comments from either Mark or Kathleen on how we would, do that from a logistical point of view in our zoning.
Sure. I think, what comes to mind right away is that oftentimes when we try to put code in place to solve for everything, we can never solve for everything, right? So you're going to have standards that are going to go against some existing conditions. And where I've seen it work well are those jurisdictions that allow staff to look at things that are kind of an unusual fit and work towards the intent, right? So there's a neighborhood character intent, that what the built environment might look like, and it may not fit the strict, this lot needs to be exactly 50 feet wide in order to do X, Y, Z, so that staff has some discretion to, especially, a planning staff, one would assume that's what they do for a living, that they should be able to, within a certain percentage, say, this meets all these other criteria, but for X. And so there's some administrative process. What we don't have is that right now. And so anything that smells a little different pretty much ends up going the public process route, which is where you can't, no developer wants to take that route because there's so much cost up front that they have to go through in order to even just get to the public process. Does that help? Okay. And I think we're going to, in the next section or the last section, we talk a little more about that.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Fay.
Yeah, with the topic of community character with the guidance of Kendi Keast it's probably been 2 years ago already, was early in our process with them. Community character became very, very specifically defined. It is not up to any individual person's definition. They brought in some very specific parameters about what each community character is. We had very, very serious conversations between the city staff and some citizens who objected to the labels of community character they were given, and then those were modified specifically for Littleton. So what I would ask the council member who brought this up to do is contact probably the city manager and get a hold of the map, the community character map that lays out what each community character is. It's not up for individual interpretation. I would guess that our speaker, Ms. Hilberg, probably wasn't plugged into that. But her explanation of how community character is malleable by each person's interpretation is not the case in Littleton. We were there, but we are not there anymore. We paid a lot of money, and we had an excellent consultant, Gary Mitchell, again, who works for Kenny Keast, who laid that out for us. So a community character has been laid out for citizens, and they have now an expectation of what that community character is by definition, very specifically. And we have an obligation as a city and as a city council to preserve that. That's one of the things we're trying to do. So look up the map. It's there. That's all I have.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
City Manager, if you could take that recommendation, send that out to all council members, if you would, please. Great, council, any other? All right, Corey, we're ready to move on.
Hey, did you have a final comment there?
Oh, I was just going to say point taken. The response wasn't to the actual Kenny Keys character description. It is the voices we hear in the community maybe aren't really following the script.
True.
Okay. Well, my name is Kyle Henderson. I've been involved with the Housing Task Force since the beginning, since 2016. And so I've been on the group since then. I wear 3 hats, I guess. I also chair the South Metro Housing Options Board. And then where I spend the bulk of my time is as a for-profit developer, doing multifamily projects in Colorado and Utah. So for a national builder. So I experience development in various communities up and down the Front Range of Colorado, as well as, like I said, in the Salt Lake area. So I've had a chance to experience different communities' approach to housing. And I will say that Littleton is not unique in terms of struggling with this question of how do we deal with housing? How do we address housing? Especially as a community like Littleton that's in this kind of landlocked and aging type community where we're really kind of at the stage of trying to say, how do we reinvent ourselves, or what does Littleton look like moving forward, I should say. So here are some of the possibilities the Housing Task Force wanted to present to council to consider, to think about. Suggestion number 1, you heard a lot of it already tonight in the presentation ahead of us. We've been actively involved in looking at the ULOC process, but zoning changes that allow for redevelopment of key parcels and corridors that specifically address housing. What we've discovered as we've looked at this is that our zoning code, as the way it's currently set up, is not housing friendly. It's not housing friendly for pretty much anything, but for maybe single family detached, type houses. So that's not conducive to meeting the comp plan goals of the 6,500 units that have been mentioned various times this evening. So really that is the key component that we think is critical, that housing needs to be front and center as it relates to, as we look at what this the rezoning process, the ULUC process looks like. And so let me talk about that in a couple of different ways. Number 1, corridors we see is a huge opportunity. We've heard tonight a few different things. Well, number 1, we've talked a lot about ADUs, so I'm not going to talk about that a whole lot more. But you know, our neighborhoods are fairly well baked, fairly well cooked, right, in terms of our single-family detached neighborhoods, and ADUs might be an answer that we need to look at and consider for some areas, but really, as we look at where the housing opportunities lie to really make a dent in that 6,500 is going to be in the corridors. Okay, so we've already talked. I mean, you guys have already gone through the process of looking at downtown. We know what downtown is going to want to be. It's a great, you know, it's our crown jewel, right? Everybody loves downtown, and now we know what that looks like. And really, what we want to talk about is the opportunity to continue that pattern up and down the corridors, right? Because that is what makes Littleton great. And so we want to continue to expand on that with more types of housing and more housing in general along the corridors. And so really, that's really the key is looking at the zoning that will allow and move Littleton. And I'll be honest, Littleton has traditionally been known as pretty much a community of no as it relates to development, right? I mean, so I know this isn't the first time this council has heard something like that. And I think there's an opportunity if we're looking for people to start reinvesting in Littleton and in the house of our community, that we need to be a zoning that allows as a community of yes, of more housing and of more opportunities for housing up and down our corridors. So that's suggestion number one, Corey. And then really in more detail around this, we've talked a lot about the missing middle tonight. I think this diagram does a really good job of helping to illustrate what we're talking about. We have, you know, a lot of detached single family homes in our community. That's the bulk of our housing stock. We really don't have the zoning that's allowed for or will allow for what's typically considered mid-rise. And so those are kind of the barbell ends, if you will. And what we're talking about is the missing middle. And that's everything from the duplex and all. Missing middle is all considered multifamily. I heard Councilmember Elrod refer to, you know, multifamily as maybe a different definition, but really once you can put two units together, that's multifamily. And so pretty much all this missing middle housing is considered multifamily to various degrees, whether it's a duplex, triplex, sixplex, townhome, multiplex, live work, garden apartments, and even, you know, some podium apartments where it's really that missing middle. So this is both missing middle, both on structure in terms of what types of properties we're talking about. Again, the duplex through the apartments, but it's also the missing middle of kind of the income earner. And I've heard a lot of conversations tonight as well around what does affordable mean, and you know, what is affordability, which I think is a better, maybe a better word, but you know, traditionally, HUD would define affordability as being that 80% AMI and lower, and then the 50% AMI and lower is actually where you'll get to the very low income. But the missing middle is really focused more on that 80% AMI up to 120% AMI from an income standpoint. So there's a couple different definitions you'll see around the missing middle. So one is housing types, which we're showing here with this diagram. And then the second is the missing middle of housing stock that appeals to that 80% to 120% AMI. And that's where we're also starting to slowly move out of that, where we're only 120% AMI and higher. I think it was Councilmember Bay that was asking a comment or made a comment, something about, you know, we can't, you know, I mean, if you're a waiter, you can't, and that's all your income, you're not going to buy a $500,000 home. That's not, of course, that's not what is expected, right? No, and I'm seeing your hand signals, right? And I don't think you were saying that, but I just wanted to clarify that obviously, depending on people's income, they have different choices, different options available to them. And so that's really what we're focused on, is saying we need more choices and more options for different folks. So if you're a two household college educated household, and you can afford to buy, you know, the $600,000-$700,000 home in Littleton, perfect. That's great. That's what we want. And then we also need to have other options for other folks. So So that's really where we're talking about the missing middle. It's two types. It's the income options, and then it's also the housing types options. So, and then where these really make the most sense is going to be in these corridors. So this is really tied to my first point of, or the first point of focusing on the missing middle can really fill in the gaps. And we have a lot of gaps in our corridors, as Brett showed in the previous presentation, whether it's Broadway or Littleton or Santa Fe, there's plenty of opportunities to add to that missing middle housing stock. Next slide, please. So suggestion number 2, I think we've talked, you guys have talked about ADUs a lot tonight, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, and it's going to be something you guys are going to talk about later. But we do think it's a potentially easy solution to fill in the gaps on some opportunities to in our existing single-family neighborhoods that are, especially the stuff that's older and it's got more space and it's got more land, and it really is appealing and works well for ADUs. And suggestion number 3, this is really a big one. I can speak from having been involved with developments both in Littleton and developments outside of Littleton, but really figuring out how we can streamline our process and provide clarity around the predictability for housing developers. Because right now, it is foggy at best when looking at how do you develop housing in Littleton. And so we think there's a lot of potential and a lot of opportunity, and some pretty easy opportunities actually to clean up the code and to help with the zoning, so that not just with the zoning, but also the process internally with how to go through the processes. As Kate mentioned, developers, when they're looking at opportunities to build new housing, they really want to understand the risk associated with developing a certain property. And part of that risk is, what's the process? What's the predictability of the process? And right now there's no predictability, and there's nothing but risk associated with trying to invest in housing in Littleton. And so that is an opportunity, I think, if we really want to see more and more types of housing, that will help. Because at the end of the day, I think, we're going to continue to have the $500,000 homes, and it's going to keep going up because our housing continues to go up. But part of that, the reasoning for that is supply and demand. It really is kind of simple economics. And so as long as we continue to not build housing in Littleton, then it continues to be less supply and more demand. And so it's really simple economics on why a lot of our housing has been skyrocketing in Littleton lately. So part of the way we can help with that is to bring more housing online in Littleton. So that's all I have for my section. Questions, comments as it relates to my
Yes,
section?
okay, Council, we are starting with Councilmember Grove.
It sounds naive, but for the first time, there is a formula based on this AMI. It's a housing cost price to buy the house and a percentage of income that goes towards that. So we can define a range. It may be a moving target, but that could be defined, it sounds like.
If it's okay with you, I'm going to share a screen with you real quick, and I'll show you something. There we go. Let's see. This is not my first Zoom. I should be able to do this now. There we go. All right. Can everybody see the AMI chart?
Yes.
All right.
We can see it, we can't read it.
You can't read it. I'll zoom in here in a second.
Oh, wait a second, I can look up here. Okay.
Oh, there you go. So this is published annually by CHAFA. CHAFA is the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. And so these are the, you'll see we're in Arapahoe County. So this is the AMI limits that define in 2020 what is 120% AMI of a 4-person household is 120,000. Okay, 100% AMI of a 4-person household is 100,000. And you can kind of see, again, very low income, which is how HUD defines very low income, is 50% AMI. For one person, that's $35,000 a year. That is, that's more than minimum wage by quite a bit. I forget what minimum wage works out to be, but anyway. So, I mean, you can do the math on that. But this kind of just gives you a sense, right? 80% AMI is what HUD defines as low income. And typically it's 80% and lower in terms of income when you're talking about quote unquote true affordable, if you will. And so this just gives you a sense of what that means. There is a definition in terms of that affordable. Now, you know, a lot of times we talk about what's attainable housing, you know, and that's typically going to be, again, more like that missing middle. Maybe that's that 80% to 100% AMI, or just really the idea of can we afford to live in Littleton somewhere, whether it's renting or buying based on, you know, our various occupations or stages of life. That's really what it comes down to. And yeah, does that help?
Yes,
answer
because now we have a number.
There you go.
And it may change next year, but at least we kind of know what we're talking about. Instead of throwing out 300 and 200, now we have a number that we're looking towards. And it makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, HUD updates these numbers annually, but they don't change by much.
Correct. And that's part of and they're based on incomes, right? And so that's part of the problem, is that our incomes have not been keeping up with the cost of housing, right? And so that's really, and again, that's not a Littleton problem, as we alluded to earlier. That's the U.S., but more specifically a Colorado issue, right, that we're dealing with along the Front Range.
Thank you.
Great.
You bet.
Thank you. Councilmember Fay, and then me.
One of the things we're struggling here without labeling it, and I'll try to label it, is that we have portions of Littleton that were designed, that were built to be rather affluent income housing. I'll use as an example the neighborhood, it's east of Broadway, north of Dry Creek. Some of the streets are Easter and Fremont. They're kind of between Broadway and Heritage High School. Those were built in the 60s for people who were brought to Littleton to be engineers for what was called Martin Marietta then. Now it's Lockheed Martin. Very, very well-paid people. That's who bought those houses then. On the other side of Broadway, on the east, I should have said west side. I think I said east side. On the west side of Broadway, a little farther south, you have Oak Brook, again, my neighborhood, 500 houses that were designed for double income professionals. So we have now accounted for most of the south end of District 3. If we try to turn those neighborhoods into affordable, we have a problem, because we've already committed to preserve community character. Community character, as we learned from Gary Mitchell of Kenda Keast. Gary isn't with us anymore, but Brett Keast is. Those neighborhoods were designed to be a particular character. If we put multifamily in between those houses, or if we put multifamily houses in housing in place of those, we have changed the community character significantly. And we'll have to change the zoning to do that. And one of the we need to put out both our desire to be inclusive and provide housing, apparently for absolutely everyone, beside our promise to our citizens who are already here to preserve the existing community character. At least in District 3, we can't do both. We can't do both. Now, the assumption there with Mr. Henderson is that we have not added housing. That's not true. In District 3, we have added in the Marathon property a lot of apartments, many Amley apartments. And so if you look at the, what would it be? The northeast intersection quadrant of Dry Creek and Broadway, there are tons of new apartments, and they changed the community character.
I'm going to share that just since you're referencing.
Another thing that Mr. Henderson said is that the 6,500 units are in the comp plan. I don't think they're in the comp plan. I think those 6,500 units recently appeared as a recommendation from the Housing Authority, and that up until a week or so ago, that was 3,400 units. I think that has recently bumped up significantly, and that would have been after the comp plan was approved. So I just want to be careful about assumptions there.
Yeah.
Of what is. Okay, that's all I have.
Respond to Councilmember Faye's, a couple of your comments. You guys can see my map now, is that correct?
Yes.
Great. So you're referring to the Amley Littleton Village apartments, and this is the old Marathon property.
Yes.
Was back in the day, a campus, and the one was vacant, and then recently in the process of redeveloping into a horizontal mixed-use development. And so, yeah, this is now taken on its new character as a infill development, and I think it's done a pretty good job of single-family detached, single-family attached, multifamily. This is some condos. This is some commercial. This is what we'd consider a traditional horizontal mixed-use development, infill development, and it's certainly, I think, done. I guess everybody has a different opinion, but I think it did a good job of addressing the different housing needs that we might need in Littleton. Although interestingly enough, there are no affordable units contemplated in that, which again we can talk about. You had mentioned, and I guess the other point I wanted to say, you had mentioned Oak Brook, which I believe is
Directly to the south.
Yeah, right here, right? Where my mouse is moving?
Keep going all the way to County Line Road.
Yep. Okay. So all that's Oak Brook. And so, yeah, this was developed, whatever, decade it was. And nothing about what I just shared about trying to fill in the missing gaps on corridors was talking about trying to interfere with the character of this neighborhood. I think the point we were trying to make was the Broadway corridor, the Mineral, the Littleton, the Santa Fe, these corridors are the opportunities to fill in the gaps. And most of these neighborhoods, as you pointed out, they're pretty well baked, right? I mean, they were developed and designed as such, and maybe there's opportunities for ADUs, maybe there's not, but that's not where we're going to find the bulk of the 6,500. It's going to be in the corridors. It's going to be in the Broadways and the Littletons and the Santa Fe's. And so that's really the point. And one other thing, I forget the name of this neighborhood. If anybody can help me out. I know that's Southbridge. I don't know if this is also considered Southbridge, but here's a good example of what was originally, I think it was owned by the city or the parks or somebody, some sort of municipality. And then it got sold to a housing developer, and they did an infill paired home development here. And this is a good example of exactly, the opportunity we want to see more of, which is because my mother-in-law actually was able to buy there because she wanted to be near her grandkids and wanted to have a smaller place that was close to her kids. I'm also a District 3 resident, Councilmember Faye. So, this is a great example of how you can really do smart and good infill development that addresses the missing middle, and it doesn't change the character of this neighborhood at all. It blends right in with it So that's all I have.
Great. Councilmember Fay, is that good?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I'm
All I
up. If there's no other council members after me, I'll go, and then we'll keep moving. You're close to the end of your presentation. So I just want to point out too, and thank you, Kyle, for pointing out some of the difficulties that developers have with the city of Littleton. But I want to also point out that the city does adjust its codes and ways of working with developers. It has improved greatly over the last 10 years that I'm aware of. So it has also not stopped developers from coming to Littleton, even with the challenges. Just over the last 10 years, I'm aware of thousands of units that have been built in the city of Littleton. So it isn't like we've just been sitting around doing nothing here as far as developers coming in. So there has been a lot, and I think the city manager is continually working on our codes, and that's what this, we're updating our codes now, and this won't be the last time they're updated. So with that, what do you have, about 4 more slides?
Yep, we're getting close. And just to
Right.
clarify, unless I misunderstood, the 6,500 unit number was in the original comp. So maybe I misheard
I
that.
don't think so.
Great, thank you. But,
Mark, you
city
want-
manager, do you want to?
Yeah, the 6,500 was identified in the comp plan process, so it's in the document.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Corey, back to you.
All right, I'm up. My name's Eric Veith. I am also a member of the Housing Task Force. For my day job, I work for a commercial real estate advisory services firm. I primarily focus on apartments and housing issues, and I have worked kind of across the spectrum over the years, from everything down with duplexes and triplexes all the way up to big apartment properties like Amley, Littleton Village. So this is kind of what I do for 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and why I had originally gotten involved in the task force. Also a lifelong Littleton resident. I grew up right near Oak Ridge, actually in Falcon Ridge, which is just outside of our boundaries, but went to LPS schools and now live in Council District 3 on Gallup Street in north of Ridge Road. So what we wanted with this kind of last section to address is just, I don't want to call it misconceptions, maybe there are misconceptions, but just some of these issues that have come up in the conversation already tonight and are bound to always come up in this conversation. And just kind of we wanted to give a space for these topics to be aired out and talked about and discussed among the council. So obviously one big thing that comes up and has many, many times is this idea of character. And I think the way that a lot of people look at it is that community character is about maintaining exactly what currently exists in a very literal sense. There's another way to look at community character, which is that there are characteristics of our community that people love. And I think that housing does not have to be seen as a threat to those. It can be seen as an enhancement and an expansion of those characteristics. So one concept, this first slide that we wanted to bring up is this, there's a tendency, especially in American cities, for as cities are growing, because people want to move there, things you can't control, you get denser and denser and denser in certain areas, and then you have this large part of the city or the town that is reserved for large lot single-family homes only. But what do so many people love about the city of Littleton? They love our downtown. And it's not the only thing that we love. We love the Highline Canal. We love all these other things. But the perception that finding places like the corridors, certain places in the neighborhoods, to add some gentle density and allow for things like ADUs to be built, allow for things like garden-style apartments to be built in certain contexts, provides an opportunity to create environments and parts of our town that are similar to those parts of it that we already love and drew many of us or kept many of us here. And so I think that's consideration number one. So slide, if you would, Corey. Second thing is, what's another characteristic that we talk about when we talk about community character? Walkability. I love being able to walk my dog to Moody Elementary School to play with him. But there are certain places that I can't walk. I couldn't walk to the grocery store. But there are places within our community where if I lived there, I could. So that is one thing that a lot of people would talk about, whether it's in downtown or the area around Stern Park. Oh, I love how walkable Littleton is, especially for a suburb. Adding housing in the corridors, which puts more people on the street, that can support more local businesses, etc., makes our community more walkable. And that's a core value, a core goal that we identified in the comp plan as something that our community wants, is walkability. And so maybe, yes, would be certain contexts where now you are allowing an ADU or a duplex or a garden apartment where it wasn't before. But the definition of community character doesn't necessarily need to be that we preserve those spaces exactly how they've always been, but rather that we continue to allow the characteristics of our community that everybody loves to flourish and to expand themselves. Slide, Corey. And much can be said, we've already touched on this topic of inclusivity. I think that much of what I said about walkability as an example goes for this example too. The idea that we want to be able to live in a community where our kids' school teachers can live, our mother-in-law can live, our younger, in my case, a younger sibling that would want to buy a starter home can live. All of these things are core values and part of our character as a community, and is something that housing policy can help flourish within our community. And so that is another, we think that there's an opportunity to kind of reframe this conversation around what community character really is. And to Councilwoman Bay's comments earlier, yes, we do have a land use character map, which is, I think, what she's referring to. But again, this definition of character does not necessarily mean land use character, because it can be more expansive than that. I totally understand that there was a whole process that went into that. And we are just saying that when people say they want to preserve community character, they don't necessarily mean, and we've heard this through the studios, as Brett mentioned, they don't necessarily mean that we have to preserve every single neighborhood to look exactly like it's always looked. Maybe they mean we want Littleton to be more Littleton than it's ever been. And that might involve some change and some more housing in certain places. So I don't think that's a threat. And then this last slide is if Corey would go to that. I think something we've heard from Kathleen a lot, because she's gracious enough to sit in on us with our housing task force meetings and give us lots of great input, is that I think in certain places within the city, housing is viewed as in competition with a lot of the other problems we're working through as a city right now. One great example, obviously, huge priority for the city right now is building a model of fiscal and financial sustainability. And to a lot of people, they think, well, more rooftops, more people means more ambulances and more fire services and things like that. And it's a pretty complex web of how those things get paid for and how that all really works out. But I'm of the strong opinion that more people and more housing is actually supportive of our long-term fiscal health, not a detriment to it. And so just a couple of examples here. First would be rooftop support retail. You guys have heard that before in presentations. If we are a sales tax dependent city, largely as it currently stands, more people living within Littleton, shopping within those same shops, can make a really big impact that may even equal raising a sales tax rate, for instance. Another example, and I give this specific example not to point anything out specifically, but if you take the assessed value of, say, a a car dealership along Broadway, which generates, I'm sure today, plenty of sales tax. But if you take the property assessed value of that car dealership and you compare it to the property assessed value of an apartment building, for instance, the apartment building, like in this case, I looked at one of the McDonald Automotive, but kind of between Cayley and Orchard versus Amley Littleton Apartments. And Amley Littleton per acre generates twice as much tax. So on a property tax basis. So again, it's a complex web because we don't have a lot of mills that are currently dedicated to the city. And so how much of that increased assessed value do we actually capture as a city? Not much right now. There may be a couple of steps to get there, but we think there's an opportunity to align our priorities as a city and align incentives so that we don't feel like these things are in competition with one another. And then the last point is just investment begets investment. The more that you see revitalization of some areas that are maybe dilapidated or specific properties that could use kind of a facelift, the more you will see more of that coming in, and as the values of those properties go up, as more retail customers show up to shop at those centers, the city starts to generate more and more revenue. So I think really, if anything is taken away from this slide, it's that I think it's an assumption that housing has to be in conflict with fiscal sustainability as a city. And I think I would encourage all of you guys to question that assumption and to keep it in mind as we as a city continue to work towards long-term fiscal health. And that is the end of our presentation. And at this point, happy to take any other questions.
Great, thank you. We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, for your portion of the presentation. I appreciate your comments, and I really appreciate you presenting an alternative, more optimistic perception of added future housing to the city of Littleton as something that, if managed correctly, can enhance character. Because after all, that's another thing that we've been charged with doing by our community, not just preserving character interpreted as sort of cordoning off existing Littleton and leaving it unchanged for as long as possible, but enhancing character, right? Accepting that change is going to happen and using it to our advantage to create a thriving future community. I think you said more of the Littleton we love. I suppose to a certain extent I understand the nervousness about change, but when we start talking about shanty towns as an adjective for ADUs, I just think that that's too nervous, right? I think that we have to maintain an optimistic outlook about how we can use change to improve our community. I do want to reiterate my point from earlier, because I think that last slide, though it's appreciated, is doing what I don't want us doing, which is making the case for more housing, right? From my perspective, the city manager just said this, that the number is in the comprehensive plan, right? I think it would be a grave error for any council at this point to try to resist that comprehensive plan, right? We have learned the lesson as a community over and over and over again that if we don't set long-term goals, if we don't do long-term visioning, if we let change just happen to us because we're scared of it, that we end up with really bad results that detract from our community. I think that it's incumbent upon this council to recognize that that is our mandate. The community has said we are going to develop 6,550 more units of diverse housing stock in the community. And I think that we really need to start emphasizing that our job with a lot of policy decision making is to carry forward the comprehensive plan. So thank you all for your presentations.
Great, thank you. Any other council member before I go? No? Correct, don't see anybody else. Thank you, Eric, for your information. Also, to address your question, Mayor Pro Tem, is I often hear people say that, oh, people are afraid of change, they don't want change, but yet Littleton keeps changing. I think it keeps changing for the better. We don't just jump into change, but the city does move forward and does consider it. So I think labeling that, people that don't want change is a gross overstatement. I've been involved with the city a while, and the city is constantly changing. And yeah, you may get a few naysayers, but it doesn't stop the city from making good decisions that has helped all of the city. So with that, anything else, Council? If not, Mark, our city manager, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, again, I personally want to also thank the task force, all of you who presented here this evening, and certainly those behind you that continue your work. I think it was well said here that, we just don't have the capacity as staff to kind of further a lot of that discussion at the moment. So, we are relying upon you to bring us information. So thank you for your efforts. We do, again, have a council goal setting here for affordable housing. And again, I can't remember exactly when, but it's coming up soon. And I think this conversation to me is very helpful, just not only what we had with Brett Keese, but certainly our task force. And for us to lay out a strategy over the next couple of years about how are we going to take this on, because it is obviously complex and has lots of nuances. So again, appreciate everybody's participation and conversation.
Great. And we do have one more comment from Councilmember Elrod. We have 3 minutes.
I was just, to your comment, Mark, about the upcoming discussion on affordable housing, the schedule that Kyle shared with us, which gave us those numbers, is an incredible piece of information for us to reference as we level set that definition of affordable housing, so we can be clear of what it is and what it is not. It was very clear in that schedule. So Kyle, thank you for sharing that. And let's just ensure that becomes part of our packet as we have that discussion, Mark. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And in closing, I want to thank the Housing Task Force, the whole committee. I think it's wonderful. And to Kyle, Kate, Eric, and Corey, thank you very much. I think you guys bring an expertise to this whole process that helps out the whole city, the whole council. Also, and what is important, we congratulated or thanked our last presenters in our last thing, but they're paid consultants. I want to point out that this task force are made up of volunteers, and you two are all professionals, but you're not being compensated for it. So, and I think the information you provide us with is invaluable. So thank you, and thank you to all the entire task force. If there's nothing else, I'm looking around, I see nothing else. It is now 9:57, and thank you very much to everybody. We stand adjourned.